Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the special council meeting of August 20th, 2025. It's great to see so many people out this afternoon. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Coast Salish people, specifically the Shiano First Nations, on whose territory this district of Metchosin building stands, and our neighbors, the Sook Nation. We recognize, respect, and acknowledge our First Nation governments, all of whom are making important decisions for their nations and have a long-standing relationship with the land, the sea, the waters that continue to this day. So, Council, before you, we have the agenda for this meeting. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the number of pinks that we have, including two letters from Bev Bacon, Stephen Sawyer, Carol Voigt, Morgan Yates, Ellen Frisch, Nicole Shukin, Sherry Rourke, Owen Clark, Craig Temple, Jillian Mayer, Sheila Moult, and Richmond and Sarah Anthony. With that, I'll take a motion moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Epp.
Just I provided before the meeting several notices of motion that I'd like to attend to at the tail end of the meeting.
We'll add that to number 5, notice of motion, and number 6 will be adjournment. With that, I
just want to move an amendment to the agenda to move up the debt financing discussion agenda item 4B and put that just before we consider the recommended options from council. If there's a second for that, I would explain.
I'll second that.
Yeah, so we're going to consider several options that are all about financing, and some of us are concerned about the debt load that we might be entered into. So I'd like to have the opportunity to hear from our CFO about debt financing and ask some of the questions about what he's presented there in order that we can discuss that as part of our deliberations on the recommended option.
Okay, the report on debt financing is not for decisions. This is for information only. It will be repeated again in September, so we're not making any decisions on debt financing. The purpose of this meeting is for the grant application. I'd prefer to keep it the way it is because that is what staff is comfortable with, and that's how the agenda was set.
Right. Well, maybe I'll hear from other councillors, but I'll provide a response if you like.
Say that again.
I said I'd like to hear from the other councillors if they're okay, and then I can respond.
Councillor Shukin.
Thanks, Mayor Little. I'm comfortable with leaving the agenda as it is, and I think you make a good point. We're not at the point where we're talking about debt financing. We don't know the path ahead specifically about finances as yet. There will be a lot more time to weigh and consider. I'm comfortable with where the agenda is right now.
Okay. Anybody else wish to weigh in?
Well, I can respond perhaps to say that I noticed the option recommended by staff includes the words that council would submit an application that would say that we will support any cost overruns for the project. That I think means debt, and that's why I presume the debt issue is on the agenda. And to ask us to make a decision on that motion before understanding the issue of the debt that we might be facing seems irresponsible. So I'm not meaning to be disrespectful to the staff, but I think they set up the agenda, but in fact we need to have that discussion about how does it work? How much money is involved here, and how can we pay for it, and how can we make the commitment to support cost overruns if we don't know how that's going to be managed?
Mm-hmm. Councillor Epp.
The way the grant's written, that those are just required parts included in the grant application. I'm comfortable leaving it the way it is. I think today we're not discussing finances, we're discussing how to apply, if we apply for a grant.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, Mayor Will, could you remind me when is this grant, if we choose to go forth, is going to be submitted?
Will be submitted before September 12th.
And will we be having a discussion about finances before that date?
No, there will be another discussion mid-September regarding a similar report to what CFO Creek has given us here.
Before the application or after?
After the date is September 12th. The grant.
So I support what Councillor Gray is saying, and having read quite a lot of the correspondence, both in print here and people contacting me, I think that this is one of the big concerns in the community is the cost. Regardless, we get the grant or we don't, but where are we actually going with this, and how much of this, it's all interchangeable perhaps. And it's unfortunate we're having it the time of day we are. I'm surprised there's this many people, but I know there's a lot of people who couldn't make it. This is significant, so it's unfortunate that it is kind of laid out the way it is. It'd be nice to have more information before we do votes.
There is going to be more information in this, in some form similar to this. The question regarding the finances, the debt financing will be repeated in September because it is so important to the community as well. It's a little bit premature to make decisions on debt financing right now because we don't know our entire financial picture. We don't know whether we're going to be don't know at this point if we're going to submit the grant. We don't know if we're going to get the $7 million. What we do know is if we don't apply for the grant, we're not going to get anything. So,
correct. So in making decisions on the different options, would it not be better for us to have an idea of where our finances are so we can possibly make an informed decision on some of the components of these different options that are laid out for us in this agenda?
And presumably everybody has read their package so that they are informed coming into the meeting. The information, the report has been provided.
Correct, just not the deliberations.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I guess specifically, I didn't want the meeting, I'd like the meeting sort of proceed in an orderly fashion, but of course we'll need to be referring to those notes on debt during our discussion about the motions because we got to talk about the financial side of it. I've read the material. I have some questions about it to be clear about it so that I can engage in a proper discussion.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
So I'm going to, on the amendment.
All in favor on the amendment? All those opposed? Motion fails. Okay, let's call.
I'll call a point of order on the main motion now.
You're calling a point of order on the main motion.
Correct.
To adopt the agenda.
Yes. So a lot of people are mixed up about where we're at in our process. Council decided a few meetings ago to approve option 1A as recommended by staff. There were no conditions attached to that approval.
Councillor Gray, maybe you could keep your remarks till when we get in. Let's approve the agenda so we can get into the meeting, okay?
I don't think we can do that wisely. The motion that we passed was that council approve the preferred option as site option 1A in the Johnson Architect Report dated May 28, 2025 to build a new fire hall on the adjacent site to the existing fire hall. So we've made that decision already, and we made it on June 16th. So I'll just provide maybe 3 points of background and then explain what the point is about. So the first issue is Robert's rules. So Robert's rules say that no motion that conflicts with a decision already made by council is in order unless council has first adopted a motion to reconsider or rescind that decision. The second point, the problem. Well, the proposed agenda asks us to decide between option 1A and an option 3.2. The problem, council has already approved option 1A and no one has proposed reconsidering that decision. In fact, staff have now acted on the decision. The third point is a question of authority. I recall at our most recent meeting, my motion to cost a post-disaster rebuild of the Firehall admin quarters on site was rejected by council. This leaves me wondering under what authority the district requested that costing. And what about the Herald engineering report that's in our package? I hold that our council, our CAO, and staff do not have the authority to override council procedure. And I'm concerned that by proceeding without changes, we're not respecting council's prior decisions. This is procedural, by the way, not personal. My point of order is simply a reminder that it is council that sets the direction, not any one member of council nor the district administration. For these reasons, I think the agenda is out of order and should not be considered as presented unless council first votes to rescind their prior decision. Now, my motivation to rule against this point of order, Madam Chair, would mean confusion over 3 points. 1, what directions of council are actually binding? 2, the potential legal liability if the project proceeds against an adopted resolution. And 3, erosion of public and internal trust in our decision-making. Plus, it sets a bad precedent and encourages individual members of council to push conflicting motions without first revisiting the original decisions. And in this case, there might be as much as $22 million, maybe $30 million resting on the outcome of our procedure. Perhaps if the CA joined us at our table next to the mayor in accordance with our procedure bylaws, this kind of confusion wouldn't happen, but I think we need to deal with this today.
Okay, so I have been given direction by our deputy corporate officer that if council chooses to pursue the second option, that we will need to rescind the motion previously adopted by council. I'm aware of that, and that will happen. The deputy corporate officer, the CAO, and the CFO are all aware of that, and we have discussed that, and we will follow that procedure.
Well, I'm going to make a motion to challenge the chair.
Okay, so there's a motion to challenge the chair. It doesn't require a second, I don't think. And so challenging the chair means Councillor Gray is challenging my decision that it's not a point of order, that we will discuss rescinding of our previous motion if we decide on option 2. Those who vote in favor, so the challenge of the chair would be, if you vote in favor of sustaining the chair, you would vote that my decision stands. That this is not a point of order, that will continue on with adopting the agenda.
Sorry, Mayor Little, for clarity, are we voting to support the challenge of the chair or not? Or are we voting to sustain the chair?
It depends on how you word it.
My wording was to challenge the chair.
Okay, so if you vote yes, that means you challenge my decision. Okay, all in favor of challenging the chair? Councillor Gray, Councillor Donaldson. All opposed? Shukin, Epp, and Little. We'll go back to the main motion on the agenda: approval with the addition of the pinks and the notice of motion. All in favor? Those opposed? Councillor Gray opposed. Okay, let's move along. First of all, we have public participation. Those members who wish to speak at the microphone, if you could state your name and your street number or your street name, and you have 4 minutes. There's a timer on the table that goes green when you start speaking and yellow when you have 30 seconds left. Everybody's welcome to speak.
John Rand, Sailor Road. I'm just want to make a couple of comments with regards to Mr. Creek's report to council. It is on the agenda and it is germane to the decision you're making today. And I want to make it really clear that I think the report is a good report. It's very clear. It's got clear calculations, and it provides good direction to council. There is one issue I have with it, and that's in the background, page 43 of the agenda. And I'm going to read it. It says, while municipalities don't have the revenue generating tools of provincial or federal governments, full growth through new residents, businesses, and development brings new tax revenues that help fund future debt servicing and public services. In other words, this is how a conventional financing for municipalities work. Most municipalities work this way. You borrow, you mitigate the per capita debt load through growth and development. And there you've got it. It says that right here. And the reason that I'm speaking about this tonight is because there's a lot of, there's a lot of speculation as to why we had the debt-free policy. Well, this is the reason that we undertook the debt-free policy, because we knew right from the very beginning of incorporation 40 years ago that the only way we could survive as a debt-free municipality, as a rural municipality, was not to undertake the conventional processes of municipal financing, and that is incurred debt. Every council knew this. It started with Brian Killip, and he's the guy with the beard there on the photograph in the first council, and he was a professor of economics. He understood it. We've understood it for 40 years, and the most salient thing about this is that it worked. Take a look around. Against all odds, we are still a rural municipality, despite being surrounded by some of the fastest growing municipalities in the province. So the policy that we have wasn't done because we wanted to run it like a business. It was done because we understood that the only way we could continue as a rural municipality was not to get caught up in this debt cycle. And again, Mr. Creek put it very well, growth and development. And that's what you will be doing if you change the course of this municipality by voting for this particular package. And it looks like I'm running out of time. So that's basically what I wanted to say. That is the reason that for 40 years, we have had a debt-free policy.
If we could refrain from clapping, that would make everyone feel welcome and secure in this room, and so opposing views can be heard. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Carol Voigt, Gemini Drive. I did submit a letter to in the supplemental package, so I'm sure you've all read it. I won't be rereading that tonight. I just would like to summarize my comments very briefly. Before we act to encumber our community with massive debt and a grant that obligates us to pay for open-ended cost overruns, let's take the time to examine how other communities have been able to build new fire halls at a fraction of the cost of Metchosen's quote. Let's ask Cumberland, a community with a population similar to Metchosen, how they were able to construct a brand new 17,500 square foot fire hall for a fraction of the cost quoted by JD Architects. Even if that 2021 price tag of $4.2 million for Cumberland's Firehall was scaled up by 50 to 100% to reflect today's prices, the cost would still only be 1/3 to 1/2 of the cost quoted from the Metchosin structure. Finally, please do not take on any debt without voter approval as suggested by CFO Creek. A $13 million loan that could only be paid back no earlier than 30 years and accrue massive interest. Better planning before embarking upon what is likely to be the single most significant expense the district has ever undertaken is what is required at this time. Please vote for option 3, not to proceed with the grant application.
Thank you. Please don't clap.
My name is Teresa Pollard. I live at 4635 Rocky Point Road. I've been a resident for approximately 20 years. And one of the things that most impressed me when I looked for a place to live was when I looked out the windows in my house and all I saw was green. And that was pretty special to me. The fact that my property was not very sloping and I could grow a lot of food. Food insecurity is a big problem. I come from the Métis Nation. My last names are Pollard, Bruno, Landry, No, Lambert, and Lejemodiere. And I grew up in poverty in Saskatchewan. When we went on welfare when I was 7, our socioeconomics got a lot better. Housing has always been a critical issue, and also food. So one of the things about Metchosin is we have so much farmland and all this agricultural land that it needs to say agriculture, and that's probably for something different. We're talking about the Firehall, and what I want to say about the Firehall is, as our community, we're not building a fire hall. We're saving lives in our community. And people who don't have a fire, who don't have someone from the fire truck come to your house and take someone away who's gonna die, like, oh my God. Like, even my own, like, I've been on my property for 20 years and people have come and gone and I've had relatives live with me. And I bet you 10 times in 20 years, I've had someone from the fire department, not an ambulance, and maybe 2 times it wasn't life-threatening, but the one time it's life-threatening, we need our public services in the community doing it. And I know we need to upgrade, and I know we can't afford to. And so what's really important, I think, is that we go to this, we do some planning stages, because we have so many people in our community, even retired people, like retired people who are engineers and environmental scientists. Like, we got the cream of the crop here. We're an educated community. And what we could do is, we could do this Firehall account. And what we do is, we do a minimum wage. A laborer gets $30 an hour. Your grandson who's 16 wants to come and help and shovel, fine, he gets $30 an hour. If you're a first-year apprentice, like with the trades, you get 40. If you're a second year, 50, third year, 60, 70 for the journey person. If you're the project manager for the whole gig, you got a lot of responsibility. And you have to always talk to the municipality. You get $200 an hour. If you're the office manager, you're as busy as that person. You get $200. And then the other office workers get between 30 and 70, whatever their educational level is. And the beauty of this is every single dollar our municipality pays out stays in our community. That's the beauty. And the way we get a whole bunch of money is we make an account. Every person in the community who has multiples of $20 can put their money in that account. And at the very end of the project, if we have any left over, then if you're under 18, you get paid back first. No one gets interest. And people who can afford to not get paid back, we do it in, let's say your family wants to donate $300, but you only want to donate it for 6 months. Well, you put 6 months. Okay, but let's say you're one of the people in our community who's a multimillionaire and you want to just finance the whole shebang, go for it. But that little school was not built because some government gave us money. That little school isn't just a school. It was pride for the community. And I think we're worth it.
Thank you, Teresa. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Alan Miller, 4199 Stone Meadow Road. I haven't been following this as much as closely as I could because my wife, Jennifer, she's in the hospital and she's terminal. So that's here or there. But the thing is, John was he missed a word when you were describing the Chosen. The Chosen is an oasis of around Langford, Colin, and Zook. Man, when you come into Metchosin, you get so relieved, a breath of fresh air, and not a traffic light to bother you. Now, on with this thing. I found it. I only picked it up today, and I'm trying to understand what the heck we're trying to approve here. The estimates don't seem to include anything. Really, is this just for? Because, like I said, I haven't been active, so I don't know if we have a plan, a drawn plan on the books or something like that. But this thing doesn't even appear that doors are included, windows are included. It's sort of an incomplete guess, and for this price, that's nuts. You know, we shouldn't be bothering with this. And then one last thing about it, I find it pathetic that this council is holding a meeting at 4 o'clock. I hope this isn't a known thing for people that have to come and voice their opinion and vote on things. Because half the time, people are still at work or in the common crawl. This should be done at 7 o'clock at night. And another thing is the date. August? You know, I ran the Fish and Game Club for years, or a couple of years anyways, I was allowed. We couldn't fill, I had 28 directors. That's me, 28 of you guys in the club. I could not get a quorum in July or August to the business meeting. So this is my point, is it really is a bad time of year to do this, and it's also a bad time. Date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty Whitehouse, Rocky Point Road. 3 points that I hope I will be very quick about. First, following up on Mr. Ranz's comments about development typically is what pays for financing. I want to point out that even without that, residential development does not pay for itself over the long run. The amount we receive in taxes does not typically for any community exceed the amount, or receiving tax does not typically exceed the amount that costs in services. Second point is that there's consideration of for the new Firehall, if necessary, asking for the Agricultural Land Commission to remove that land from the Agricultural Land Reserve. I would prefer that that we request instead that it be changed to get permission for non-farm use, if we get to that point. And thirdly and finally, and not for the last time, I'm sure, certainly not for the first, this is the most important decision that this council has come across in its term. Is one of the most important decisions that any council has come across in the history of Metchosin. Please do the work necessary so that in the final votes, you are all together, you are unanimous. This is not the time to divide council and give the community a divided vote. Do the work that you need to do, and it begins with identifying where you are in agreement. not focusing on where you disagree.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Nicole Shukin, Levon Road resident. I did submit a letter and I'm just going to kind of read parts of it. I want to start by thanking Council for tackling this tremendously challenging and long overdue project of a modern fire hall. And I just want to comment on two aspects of the challenge. First is borrowing to help fund fire hall replacement or retrofitting. And the second is alignment with Metchosen's climate action plan. And I think it's instructive to look at how neighboring communities, including rural communities, like East Souk or Dashwood, have funded their new fire halls over the past 10 years. And I've compiled just a few examples. In 2015, East Souk, a rural community that's still rural the last time I looked, population approximately 2,000, took out a $1.8 million loan, amortized over 10 years to build their new fire hall. 2017, Bowen Island electors voted 82% in favor of borrowing $3 million for construction of their main fire hall and emergency operations center. 2019, Cumberland, approximately 4,500 population, one voter approval for a loan of $4.2 million. So as Carol says, it's a model fire hall, but it was entirely funded by a loan. 2022, Dashwood approved a loan of $6.2 million to fund its new rural fire hall, completed in June of 2025. 2023, Crofton, population approximately 1,500, approved a $4.6 million loan to fund its new fire hall. 2024, Cowichan Bay, population approximately 2,500, approved borrowing up to $16 million to build a new fire hall. The loan is being repaid over 20 years by the Cowichan Bay Improvement District's residents. 2024, population approximately 6,000, announced it was going ahead with a new fire hall. An initial Class D estimate for Fernie's projected the cost to be $20 million. The subsequent Class C estimate brought the cost down to $16 million. So everyone is aware that what's before council currently is just a Class D estimate. And Fernie is borrowing $3.5 million to help fund the build. Quadra Island 2025 approved borrowing $2.9 million. So it's hard, in fact, to find examples of communities that have not had to borrow to fund their fire hall projects. And it may be unrealistic to think that this is possible for Metchosen. The above communities recognize that their firefighters were unsafely housed in old buildings, riddled with virtually the same seismic and occupational deficiencies that have been identified with Metchosen's fire hall. And they understood that the first priority of local government is protection of lives and meeting post-disaster standards in buildings that house the community's emergency services, not being debt-free. And even communities smaller than Metchosen showed that they're neither small-minded nor tight-fisted when it comes to fiscally responsible borrowing for emergency services. So along with funding or borrowing to fund a new fire hall, I want to note how missing our climate action plan has been in discussion around a new fire hall. In 2023, Metchosen Council adopted a declaration on the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis. And the declaration included this statement, quote, municipal governments can and should make decisions and adopt policies that will prepare the community and mitigate climate change and negative climate-related events. Metchosen also paid $20,000 for a climate action plan that it adopted in 2023. For the declaration and the plan to be more than just political hot air, they need backing up with concrete investments. Why has the new fire hall not been more explicitly weighed through the lens of both the declaration and the plan? And I invite council to have that climate action plan in their hands as they continue discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I can't see the clock, but anyway. Diana Smith, 4488 William Head Road. I'm not commenting on details, just to say I think it takes courage to be a councillor and a mayor, so good for you. First of all, as an APRM member, I want to disassociate myself from the letter that was sent out to members recently. Both the tone and the content do not represent my and other members' views. So just so that you know, I'm sure you've probably all seen it. I want to comment on two viewpoints common in Machosen that both reflect quite rigid thinking, and which I hope the district of Machosen will not fall prey to. Rigid thinking can be detrimental both to conceiving of options and then assessing them for their cost effectiveness and their contribution to a rural and healthy community. These two viewpoints are rigidly holding to the practice of never borrowing money, and the other is never taking land out of the ALR. There's nothing necessarily morally or materially superior about holding either positions. Borrowing money to help finance a useful and necessary community facility and service when it can be done prudently and is affordable may be far more cost-effective and visionary in the long run than options not requiring borrowing money. Of course, there are no Of course, there can be no guarantees that the no borrowing option will not go over budget and require borrowing or be compromised. Same with ALR land. It can be and may be the best option to use a small portion of ALR land if it contributes to an environmentally and sustainable future. For example, providing services to make the community practically attractive to farmers and farm workers is beneficial. And just commenting on the policy, the no debt policy, I think John Rands, a respected neighbor, conflates no debt with rural community. You can have both. You can have a rural community, a serviceable Firehall, and you can borrow money if necessary. It's not either or, it's both. Thank you.
Eric White, Machosen Road. Everyone here on council, I think, ran on a policy of fiscal responsibility. And I think part of that is understanding borrowing and things like inflation, and the fact that if inflation is 10% and you borrow at 2%, well, you are borrowing at a much lower rate than inflation. And if you do not borrow and you carry on and just try and save, you're losing money. You're going backwards. If we try and save for a fire hall and try and battle off inflation, we'll never get there, because I don't know if anyone remembers, but lots of people got exceedingly rich after COVID. Not rich, land rich, because 10% inflation over 3 or 4 years added hundreds of thousands of dollars to people's properties. 10% inflation over 3 or 4 years could add 10, 20, 30 million more to our project. If we delay, we're adding cost. And that's the problem with not borrowing. If we wait and try and save the money, we may never get there. The other thing that I think is worth noting in delaying is the emergency response side of it. We are at the end of our fire hall's useful lifespan, and we are at the end of many cycles of our planet's natural rhythm. If we delay and don't get this project done before those cycles of our planet's natural rhythm, whether that's the great earthquake we're supposed to be having that's been predicted for the last 30 years, or the shutdown of our solar polar magnetic field and we have a complete grid loss, we will hope that we had a fire department built yesterday. So I would consider that in the cost of things, is if we're not prepared when it happens, we won't be prepared and we'll all be in a really dangerous position. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak at public participation?
Kiara Kahakawilla, Perry Crossroad. I'm speaking as a 37 Metchosin resident. I'll start again. I'm speaking as a 37-year Metchosin resident with 17 years of practical, relevant experience and context directly related to the decisions you are considering today. I can also proudly say that I have had members of my family serve with the Metchosin Volunteer Fire Department. Before you discount my experience, I would remind you that the reason you are in a financially stable position to even contemplate the level of borrowing you are considering is because of the firm but fair decision-making and policy setting that has preceded you for almost 40 years. My concern that I will speak to today is that your CFO's report on the Firehall cost comparison does not touch on the cost to Metchosin's rural identity. On June 16th, Council passed a resolution asking staff for a report on the formal application process to the Agricultural Land Commission to exclude 4450 Happy Valley Road, the entire municipal property, from the Agricultural Land Reserve. This is a significant deviation and precedent-setting decision that, if brought forward to and approved by the ALC, will likely change Metchosin's identity and farming character for the future. There's only one reason to remove land from the ALR: development. Removing a portion of 4450 Happy Valley Road for the envelope needed for the proposed new Firehall site is one consideration, one that may not need to be considered when you have an option to seek a non-farming use permit. Again, the reason is development, even if that development is for a municipal building. But the concept of removing the entire 4450 Happy Valley Road from the ALR is reprehensible and shocking to those of us who have fought for and who are still fighting today to keep Metchosin as the rural oasis in a fast-paced, development-friendly environment of the West Shore. On June 16th, only Councillors Donaldson and Gray were opposed. The motion passed with a 3-2 split. My comments now are directed to Mayor Little, Councillor Shukin, and Councillor Epp. In 2022, you all ran on campaigns to protecting and preserving Metchosin as a rural community. You all identified keeping Metchosin's financial stability as a priority. Unfortunately, it would seem that those promises to residents may not be kept as you consider the options for building the new Firehall. Metchosin's rural heritage deserves more than a little consideration.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Good afternoon. Vio Mitchell, Whitty Beach Road, Metchosin. Yeah, okay, I'll speak up. I have a booming voice most of the time. Violaine Mitchell, 530 Whitty Beach Road, Metchosin. I've moved up the road. I wasn't actually intending to speak today, but I've been looking a lot at the wall at the back of people who really fought to keep Metchosin rural. There are incredible odds against this community, as we all know. And there were key principles. Keep land in the ALR, be debt-free. It has stood us well, and I think we've heard from those who've spoken to that well. I've heard some of you turning to the proposal say, no commitments are being made. Don't worry, we're not making a decision. But in fact, we are. We're applying for a grant for $7 million for a new building. We have set out what that will be. I went and looked at the strategic. I've actually had a career in grant making. For 25 years, my job has been reviewing and approving grants of tens of millions of dollars, up to 500 billion and smaller. So I actually pride myself on knowing a little bit about grant making. And one of the things that you really do want when you have a grant and when you look at it is what are the criteria that people have used? Have they used a good, transparent process? Have they identified options and really clearly defined the pros and the cons? What's on the table, what's off the table? What are the risks? And it may well be that option 1A is the best. I will give you that. But it's really not clear to me and I've read through all the documents over time, that we've actually gone through all the options as carefully as we should have. And I think it's almost impossible on our website to find actually a comprehensive list of options right now. So I really think that's something we need to really look at. I also think, you know, when you look at the strategic funding guideline, this is the first intake for 2025. This is a 10-year program, a $1.6 billion program for the Community Rebuilding Fund. This is the first intake. And one of the things they say, and they make it very clear, and I quote, is application will not be considered unless funding is secured. So there is an expectation in our grant application that we will define what that funding is. So there is some relevance, I think, to our discussion of how this will be financed. So the point I really want to make is I think there's actually more agreement in this community. Everybody sees the need for an upgraded Firehall. It is unanimous. The what we want to achieve together is there. It's the how. And sometimes when we're at loggerheads, a little bit more discussion is the right thing to do. And that really brings me to my second point, and I think Patty Whitehouse captured it very well. And I want to talk about leadership, and I actually want to talk about your leadership and your teamwork. You are the faces of this community. 30 years ago, this community was polarized and divided, ironically over a Firehall, the one that we're now fighting over. It took years to rebuild, years. Let's not let that happen again. This can be a positive process. We all want what's right. We do want an upgraded Firehall. We have the best fire department. We have enormous faith, and we want to do the right thing. So my plea to you is please don't be union reps and community activists. You are the voice and representatives and leaders of this community, not just now, but for the next 20 years. So please bring us together. Don't let us be polarized. And that's my fear, is that we're entering into a world of being polarized when we really shouldn't, because we have more in common than we think. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll repeat again, please don't clap. We want to maintain an atmosphere of welcome for everybody, no matter on what side of the equation you stand on. So please don't clap. Next, thank you.
Hi, Susan Scrafton, Sandgate Road, resident of Metchosin for 40 years. I live in one of the weir houses. It was built in 1948. Over the years, it has needed some remediation. We have borrowed a little money and we have paid back a little money. And I remember the discussion of the fire hall the first time around, and I remember this building. And I would just like to support and thank my previous speakers and urge council to take a deep breath and give some second serious thoughts to just what we are about to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak this afternoon?
Sue Panton, Sandgate Road. I wasn't going to speak today, and I have to agree with everything that everybody has said, that we do need to come together as a community, that divisiveness is not going to get us anywhere. But I'd like to pull back the lens a little bit, and the people that are saying, wait, reevaluate, talk it out some more, who's going to be responsible when it's another year, or 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 more years? This is not a new issue. This is an issue that's been kicked down the road, as many issues that have enabled Metchosin to be debt-free. There is things happening on ALR land that are not necessarily being looked at. So the conflation of rural and ALR and debt-free, and it's creating noise around what's clear. We need now to protect our residents. We need to protect it's our only infrastructure. We need to invest in it. And if I saved the 20 years to put a new roof on my own home, I'd never get a new roof. I had to take out a loan, and I've got a payment plan, and I pay it back. It's part of being in a modern world where we want to invest in the thing that gives us pride, that protects our barns, protects our homes, rescues our people. We've got an increase in people using our trails and beaches. And yes, whomever said earlier, we are the oasis. I 100% agree with you. And because of that, we need to protect it. Who protects it? Chief Dunlop and her crew. I am the wife of a first responder. And I know that when my husband went to work and his equipment wasn't safe and the building wasn't safe, it absolutely exacerbated his ability to save lives because they were worried if the radio would work. They were worried if the elevator would work. And I think that we need to show our first responders as a community that we're going to hold this down to dollars and cents. And I'm not saying not to still look at it, not to still be open-minded, and not to still be absolutely thorough in your vetting of the decision. But ultimately, we have to keep our volunteers, and we need to maybe attract a new chief at some point. Do you think they're going to want to come here? So we need to look at big picture. We need to pull back, take a breath. But I encourage you, if this grant is delayed, or any grant for a year or 2 or 3 or the next council, it's going to be potentially very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Darren Brown, Graceland Road. So I want to thank you, Mayor and Council. I want to highlight that the Herald Engineering report in today's agenda package provides both a clear and unbiased path forward, retrofitting and seismically upgrading the existing apparatus bay. That work is both feasible and prudent. We started, immediately. What this means is that our grant application should focus on funding seismic upgrades for the apparatus base. At the same time, we can responsibly use reserves to build a modern 2-story administrative building on the same site. That would be a phased approach that would streamline, avoid unnecessary ALR removals while still delivering a safe and functional Firehall complex. So temporary operations can be accommodated without major disruptions, right? We've got school right over here. Trucks can be kept in the secure outdoor caged area. The school has kitchens, classrooms for training, gender-neutral bathrooms. Portables could serve as offices, decontamination space, and other needs. So that buys us time to keep the cost contained and make a full use of existing community assets. By upgrading the bays in the spring and summer, and situating admin separately, we get the best of both worlds. Seismic resilience where it's needed most, plus a modern building for administration and training. All while pushing the ALR lands, all without pushing out the ALR lands. Maybe a little skip for a buttress. Right? But there are serious concerns with the process before us tonight. Where's the needs analysis? We're asked to borrow millions of dollars without an operational analysis showing us what the department requires or what we'll require in 20 years from now. And I'm option 3.2 in the agenda package, the unbiased engineers retrofit option seems buried while option 1A is pushed right to the front. That's not transparency. So scope matters a lot, especially when it comes to how much it costs. So in option 1A includes significantly more scope than option 3.2. Where's the analysis of those extras? Where's the cost to cover them? The Class D estimates carry a risk range of plus 30%. On a $20 million project, that's more than $6 million. And the most important question, are you planning to put Metchosin into debt without asking the community? This is a fundamental decision and one that affects every taxpayer for decades. We've heard other people represent other communities who voted for or, chose to support a Firehall. The community had a voice. Will this community have a voice? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Ed Watson, William Head Road. I also wasn't going to say anything, but there's three things that I have to get off my chest. Number one, I think it's disingenuous to suggest that the people that are opposed to this proposal don't support the fire hall, or don't think that the fire hall is important, or don't believe that we should be doing something to improve the situation there. I think that's just wrong. It's just not the way it is. I think people want you to be more prudent in terms of how you spend money. The other suggestion has been, well, you know, not a big deal to spend some money. Well, I think the provincial government is heading for about an $11 billion deficit this year. Federally, it could be north of $100 billion. And all of that money started at some table like you are, saying, oh, it's a great idea. Let's just borrow a little bit of money. Now, obviously, the scope is different, but the idea is the same. It's not the amount, it's not borrowing per se, but the amount you're talking about. One of the previous speakers went through a litany of other communities that have spent money, with the exception of the city of Fernie, and excuse me because I wasn't taking notes, but with the exception of the city of Fernie, all the examples were like a third of what we're going to spend or proposing to spend. So somebody else said it takes courage to be a counselor, and I agree. I think that you are all courageous, but it also takes courage to change your mind, to realize that the community is not supporting, or at least is divided over some proposal that's beyond their understanding, if you're like. So if you want to be courageous, take a step back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron Aubrey, 3745 Machosen Road. I'm frustrated. This motion is asking council to get an application put forward for $7 million. That's it. And I would be very disappointed. In fact, I'd be more than disappointed. I'd be pissed off if you don't do it, because that's our potential for a build in the future. We're talking about cost to us as a taxpayer. That's not what we're looking at this point. There's been no actual, you got control of the build afterwards. If you don't have the $7 million, that puts the more cost to us if we feel that we got to go forward, or you got to rethink the direction you're going to go. So well, let's not fight about anything. Let's just give council, and council, listen, put the application in before September the 12th. There's still not a guarantee you're going to get it. And yet everybody's going all over the board. Sherry here, I'm reading her last paragraph because I really says it. At the end of the day, the project is about providing our firefighters with a safe, fundamental facility and ensuring the community they serve is protected. I encourage you to stay on course. Rely on the professional expertise you sought out and not be swayed by those who would rather spread misinformation and make personal attacks rather than engage in respectful, informed debate. And that's what we need to have, is informed debate in the future. But this meeting is, we want you to just put an application in. See if we get $7 million. We're not saying build it yet. You need to know your financial figures later. And if the 7 million isn't there, that makes a big difference as to how you may or may not go about doing things. So you're doing your due diligence. And please, work as a team. This infighting is not going to win anything for anybody. You're elected to be supporting we, the taxpayer. So do that job to the best of your ability. And at this point in time, please, just put the application in. Thank you.
Beat you to the punch. Karen Hoffman, 1530 Neeld Road. I would like you to submit the application for the grant. And then after that, whether we get it or not, you can fine tune the financing or the cost estimates for what we will actually build. I support 1A as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jackie Larkin, 4856 Jelinek Place. As a number of other people have said, I wasn't going to speak, and I'm hesitant to speak because I notice how easily it is that I react to the things that some people say in a negative way and react in a positive way to what other people are saying. And that's a problem in this situation. I want to, as much as possible, keep calm and really try to do what is collectively the best for this community. So for me, if I'm involved in a project, and especially if I was involved in a project this big, I would have wanted to do a kind of scoping position before I went and asked an architectural firm. I would have wanted to say to that firm, we want you to, first of all, identify very clearly what the needs of the firefighters are, because everybody's in favor of meeting the needs of the firefighters. So what exactly are those needs? I haven't actually seen a clear document on that. Secondly, I would want that scope or that project charter, or whatever you want to call it, to give direction for the proposals to be fiscally prudent. That doesn't mean no borrowing for me, but it's fiscally prudent and demonstrating why. I would ask them to give options, which I understood they were actually asked to do and did not. They gave one option. Maybe I'm made to be corrected on that. I would ask them to consider what it means in terms of climate change and the other disasters that we could be facing up the path, which would require additional resources that we would, as a community, have to put forward. And then I would really want the council, all 5 of you, to really sit down and really talk to one another about what your perceived needs are and what you think the real options have been. And the reality is, in my view, this council is dysfunctional because constantly you have 3 people on this issue and 2 people voting against or putting forward and then getting turned down, when it would have been very easy, for example, in this meeting itself, to discuss the financial questions, because that was obviously of interest to people in the room, including a couple of the councillors. And that was turned down. And because there's a majority of 3, you turn these down instead of having discussions that are the benefit to you collectively and the benefit to the rest of us. So I don't want to say a lot more, except to say that in these times in our world, it's really important that rigidity of thinking is examined and addressed and acknowledged on all sides, rather than just blaming the other side for being rigid. And I'm going to end actually with one question, which is this notion that the grant application has to be made now. I understand that there's 3 intakes for these grant applications. Maybe I'm wrong on that and I'd like to be corrected. But if that's the case, why would we be going asking for money when we're actually not as a community unified in what we're asking for, when we could take the time to do that? So that's a question that I hope the councillors will answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nita Strauss, 1195 Woodley Gill. This is being very confusing. I haven't really figured out, I tried to figure out what this was about, but I'm so glad that so many of the other people have finally started getting to the point. What we need to do is find out how much money we can get. Apply for every grant. Let's see what we've got. Then you need to look at the architecture people that are your consultants and find out what is the lowest price and the highest price and what is included in those prices for what we can get for a fire hall. Maybe the first thing we need to do is just confirm, though I think everybody agrees here, that we want to fix the fire hall. It's gone on for way too long, and it's unsafe, and we all cherish the fire. I mean, I've had them at my house. I think they're absolutely marvelous, and I would do anything for them. So I don't know where this whole thing got off track, but all you're doing right now is saying, shall we go bid, see if we can get a grant for $7,000. Go and do that. And any other grant you can get. Find out what the pool of money we have to work with, which will then tell us what else we need to have. But we may not need to have any more money. We may be able to do it all with grants. I don't know. But I need to see a report from the architecture people as to what is the minimum price to meet the described needs, not wants, the needs of the fire hall. And that's coming from those staff members, not from us. They're telling us what they're going to need to function properly in our rural environment as a fire department. Once we get the minimum needs that they have, we can cost that out. Then let's get the little extras that would be nice to have, but if it gets too high and we don't want to pay that price, then we back down from it. Then all that information is given to all the members or all the residents of Metchosin, and we'll vote on it. And that'll be the end of it. There's no point, there's no division here. I don't think anybody's against fixing the fire hall. And I don't think anybody's against, if we absolutely have to meet the minimum needs that the fire people identify, borrowing a little money. I'm not into borrowing $10, $15 million, but if we can get $10, $12 million worth of grants, then let's see what we can build for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Chernakova, 727 Pears Road, Metchosin resident for 23 years. I've dealt with grants in my life as well as one of the previous speakers, but there were grants in filmmaking. I'm a film director. And I would never apply for something and then write a script because I would never get money. I think there's a misconception or misunderstanding about how you can apply for grants. You can't apply and then decide what you do. That's why the meeting, even the agenda, has two options. You have to be very precise about what you're going to do with this money. And you also need to prove, as the previous speaker pointed out, you need to prove the rest of the funding being in place, or at least planned and approved. So I think it's very premature to put the applications up without a clear understanding what are the options, without the research of what the firefighters need, and without costing properly all possible building options. Also keeping in mind how prices increase. We had a very recent experience of something being priced and then contractor presenting us with a bill which was twice the written estimate. And when I almost had a heart attack and asked, how could that have happened? He just said, it just happened. All prices went up. So you really need to have a contingency and you have to think it through very thoroughly. And we did vote for you, and especially for the mayor, on the premise of preserving the rural character of Metchosin. I called around, I knew nothing about both candidates, so I called around and I was told to vote for you because you would preserve the zoning and the rural character. What's happening now with this little idea about possible development on the municipal land sneaking in, and it's the Overton window. First you think it's impossible, then you think maybe, and then it becomes something which is happening, and we have housing being built around, and will become Langford or Colwood or Zug. Do we want it? No. So I would really urge you, as people whom we selected, chose to consider other options, to do proper research. 3 intakes for grant applications a year. You have a few months to do the research and do your homework. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Klaus Kreyer from Liberty Drive. And allow me to share where I'm coming from. I'm a retired engineer, project manager and program manager. I have approximately 40 years experience in large utility infrastructure. One of the fundamental issues and one of the fundamental principles when you develop large projects is options analysis. I think this is what we're hearing. This is what we're seeing in all the letters. The thread that's running through the letters is the residents of Metchosin expect due diligence, and that includes rigorous options analysis. And I don't see anywhere in any documentation that that has been done. That seems to be a significant omission, in my opinion. So, leave you with that short and sharp to the point thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry Rourke, Rocky Point Road. As chair of the Healthy Communities Advisory Select Committee, and on behalf of our committee, I want to begin by reminding all of us that a healthy committee includes how we treat each other, how we work together, how safe and supported people feel. The Firehall itself is not what divides us. What divides us are the personal attacks, online and in person, that make people afraid to ask questions, share information, and their opinions. We don't tolerate bullying in schools. We certainly shouldn't tolerate it elsewhere. Outbursts of anger, yelling, insults that we're seeing in the community and online shouldn't be happening, and they shouldn't be happening in any environment. It wasn't so long ago that Metchosin stood together to protect our 911 service from being rerouted. We knew then that access to first responders and the speed at which help reaches us in an emergency is literally a matter of life and death. The risk of potentially losing our fire protection service places us back in that same position. Our volunteer firefighters deserve the tools, training, and above all, safe facilities to keep serving us at the highest level. Council has already made a decision to endorse a direction. Tonight is about applying for a grant. Not everyone is going to agree with that decision, and it's human nature to feel frustration if you don't agree. But the real question now is, how do we achieve this together respectfully and as one community? We all care deeply about Metchosin. Individually, we see separate paths forward, but we need to be mindful and create spaces where it feels safe for everyone to be heard. We are at the beginning of a long process. This moment is an opportunity to either allow division to tear us apart or to show an ability to come together and to listen and encourage residents to be engaged. We have, it's my understanding, I should say, we have upcoming public engagement sessions in an open house. Those sessions will be the, I guess, conduit to answer the questions that have been asked tonight and to identify the information that's available for residents to refer to. A lot of the questions that were asked tonight and a lot of concerns of residents has been answered. The feasibility study included an options analysis. I just think maybe there's a better way to provide information to residents so that they understand all of the work that's been put into this. They understand that a Class D estimate is very basic. There's just so much information that's out there, and I hope that people come to those sessions and educate themselves on everything that's been done and ask staff all the questions that they've asked tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for everybody for your participation this evening and for joining our meeting. Let's move on to reports. Before we begin, I just want to reiterate that the purpose of this special council meeting is to clarify council's wishes to proceeding with a grant application offered through the UBCM stream of the Canada Community Building Fund of BC. The first intake of the Strategic Priorities Fund under the new 2024-2034 Canada Community Building Fund agreement is now available. This intake will make up to 125 million eligible local government infrastructure and capacity building projects in BC. Successful applicants may receive up to 100% of net eligible costs of approved projects to a maximum of $7 million. The deadline for the first intake is September 12th, and it's fast approaching. The Strategic Priorities Fund is an application-based program available to local governments and other recipients of the Metro Vancouver and other regional districts. The funding is intended to support infrastructure and capacity building projects that are either large in scale, regional in impact, or innovative, and that align with the program's objectives of supporting productivity and economic growth, a clean environment, and strong cities and communities. Fire halls are among the long list of many eligible capital infrastructure stream categories. I ask that you council members keep focused on the issue at hand tonight. Do we want to apply for this UBCM grant of $7 million? I also ask you to keep an open mind and really listen to your colleagues, to their comments and their concerns. All of council is committed to making decisions and adopting policies that promote a resilient community to prepare for the future for the benefit of the entire community. So council, if you can turn to page 1, and actually we'll start on page 3. We've got a report from our Chief Financial Officer, Jeffrey Creek, on the fire hall cost comparisons. Yes.
I just have a question. I accept the earlier ruling about the agenda package. But are you asking us as chair to suspend our agreement that we're proceeding with option 1A for this evening? I'm not entirely sure how I can speak in favor of option 2 at the moment, given that council has already set us forward. And as we heard from even people in the audience, believe we've already endorsed option 1A. So, I brought forward my plan B. It was in the last meeting, it was on the basis that we'd already agreed option 1A. Otherwise, I could have brought forward any number of different options. So is the idea tonight we're going to forget that we made the decision and then have discussion openly and sort of politely, and then you would rescind the motion of option 1A in the future if you make a different decision tonight? Just understand that.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to forget anything. I'm just asking you to keep an open mind. You can discuss anything that you want regarding the options or any of the other options that was in the feasibility study. But just keep in mind, this is for the grant application of up to $7 million. You're not fettered in any way. You can discuss these options.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Creek.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Guess everybody's read the report, and so we'll just start going into this. Any questions? We can stop by section and go from there. So we've looked at option 1A, which was the preferred option from JDA and the engineer. So that results in the new fire hall, of course, being built on the land next to the current fire hall. Allows for current operations to stay in the current fire hall without the temporary facility, and then retains the current buildings for whatever future use the district might have. That doesn't require post-disaster standards. Option 3.2 results in the demolition of the current fire hall, the rebuild on the same footprint, and then includes seismic upgrades to the apparatus bay, although this option does require the temporary facilities for vehicles, gear, and decontamination. under the assumption that administration would be able to operate out of the EOC building for the time that construction is going on. If you want to seek any other estimates, we can certainly find out the costings for those. But the financial implications, as shown through the 2 engineer reports and estimates, option 1A with the 30% contingency on top of it is $21,358,000. That number works out to $1,276 a square foot. Option 3.2 results in it being $22,134,000. The reason it's more expensive, again, goes back to the temporary facilities. The building required to house the engines and the trucks and everything else, that's the big cost. It's like $1.7 million just for that temporary structure. The decontamination and the gear and the equipment storage is less than $1 million. And so just some comparisons there with input from the public. So Crofton there, when they finished theirs in 2024, their cost per square foot was $1,333 a square foot. Dashwood, which was completed in 2025, was $934 a square foot. The new Crest building, that's also built to post-disaster standards, is $1,198 a square foot. And then over at Hans Helgeson, which they're starting construction on this year, that comes in at $1,253 a square foot. Most of these costs, again, when we're trying to compare fire halls being built in different places, like the wonderful one of Cumberland being $4 million, like if we could get that epic, that would be amazing. That was constructed in 2020, finishing up in 2021. So they got to beat all the wonderful COVID things, and they beat the BC step code, which increased in 2024, which added, by estimates, anywhere from 12 to 20% per square foot on buildings that have to be built to post-disaster standards. So, any discussion on that? Yeah. Good. Keep rocking.
Does anybody have any questions so far as what he's asking? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. Thank you so far. So we're at the very beginning here. So it was brought up by some of the residents this evening or this afternoon, and it is something that I've been thinking as well, as having sat on the Firehall Steering Committee for 2 years, I think it is. We haven't really explored more than one option for a temporary site. And one of the things that was brought up is the school as being a site. We've already put $1 million of grant money into the school. It's refurbished. It's got gender neutral washrooms. It's got showers, kitchen, classrooms, secure cage for apparatus. Could build, if we're refurbishing the apparatus bay, it's a place we could put our apparatus during those warmer months. These are just options, again, as the residents have said, we've not explored. We've not had a conversation at this table. So I appreciate that we do have a cost from Hanscom, I think is the company. At any point, will we be exploring costs of other situations like property that we own across the street as a way of reducing some of those costs?
Through the chair. Yep. Depending on which option is chosen by council here, and then if the grant is successful and we can move forward, then all those options will be considered as to where the temporary facilities are going to be located and what would work. My concern putting the vehicles in the cage is that there's no coverage, so wind and rain and all that kind of stuff. Like they generally keep all of our fire engines and everything tip-top shape every day. So I don't know how well that would work, but could help reduce the cost where you just need a cover on it.
Councillor Ebb.
Oh, yeah, I know you mentioned it, but just as far, it seems like the most expensive part of any kind of potential renovation, replacement of the bays would be the having to relocate all the fire trucks. And I wonder if you could just be a little more specific on what details would be required in a building, a tent, or whatever they need to actually house the fire truck over a fairly long period of time.
Through the chair. So I don't have the specifics on exactly how it would be built. I can only imagine they have to build it to quite a high standard, because a $1.7 million tent is not just something that you go to Canadian Tire and buy. So I imagine it's got to be nailed deep into the ground, so it stands firm during the wind, rain, that type of thing. How that goes about, I'm not entirely sure. I'm sorry. You can look into though.
Thank you, but I guess it also would have to have all the, like the HVAC and all the necessary work-safe components in the tent with the trucks as well.
Future? Yeah, I would assume they'd have to have everything up to standard before they let anybody go in it.
The question, oh, go ahead, Councillor Gray.
Well, maybe just sticking with that point about costs that haven't been looked at. So when I look at this, Mr. Creek, I see just talking about costs. So your report is only about cost, not about the other question about what the options look like. And you've said that option 1A is less expensive than option 3.2?
Sure, correct.
And that's simply the building itself. Correct.
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that?
The cost comparison is simply of the buildings.
Oh, correct. Yeah, it's just the buildings and then the contingency being added on top of it. For
Understood.
The 30%.
And so who will pay for cost of paving the nearly 1 acre property in option 1A?
That would be on us. Yeah.
And who would pay for the septic setup?
Everything would be on the district.
So the drainage of the paved surface would be our cost as well?
Sure, correct.
No. And so all those costs haven't been included in option 1A yet. The other cost, oh, and by the way, I think it was, it'll be July 16th when I sent a note around to the CAO and about the issue of including all these costs so we can make a proper comparison this evening. And I'm not seeing those details in the documents in front of us with some disappointment. So the other cost that I asked about was option 1A. It is leaving the apparatus bay, the existing apparatus bay and the existing admin building standing.
Correct.
Yes, and then if those buildings are repurposed, my understanding is that they need to be brought up to code and there'd be significant costs associated with that. I don't need to ask you about that. I think we know that already. And so I'm going to just offer that there's a lot of cost when you do a comparison between two options. If you simply look at the building, that's one thing, and I think you're correct, the numbers that we have here, although there's some dispute on some between the reports you've given us. I look at option 1A, and I'm noticing, looking at the comparisons that were provided, the consultant, the Vancouver consultant who did the paper exercise, that's to say they took the documents and read them in their offices in downtown Vancouver, wherever they are, they told us that the estimate, say for example, of $21 million for option 1A, that's plus or minus 20 to 30%. And then they gave us a special note that said, in today's market, projects are trending to the higher end of the plus range. So they're saying to us, I think that it would be 21,000 and you better think about 30% more. And I calculate that to be about, is that 27? $27.4 million. So if we use the high end and we multiply the numbers, it comes out at 27.4 million rather than $21 million. If we add paving and sewage and drainage, I don't know what that would cost, maybe $1 million, plus or minus the percent. I mean, we'd like to have natural swales and things to take away the drainage. We've talked a lot about the bufferland, heck of a lot of water coming off that property. We don't want it just shooting into the Bilston Creek unprotected. So I don't know the numbers, but it hasn't been costed, but it's say $1 million given all these other numbers. And then the admin and apparatus bay code upgrades, well, we see here in the report, it's $3 million to do the post-disaster upgrade for the seismic alone for the apparatus bay. If we say we didn't bring it up to the post-disaster Although I think the mayor suggested search and rescue go in there and earlier EOC go in there, so maybe it does need to be post-disaster. But we need to add the cost for upgrading those buildings to code. I'll give that maybe a $3 million figure because it's 2 buildings, but not maybe the post-disaster. So I'm up now to $31.4 million. Then I add in the new operating costs that aren't on our books right now, $690,688 that you've calculated. All of that seems fair, although not accurate to me, pouring through all the documents. Then I looked at option 3.2. And if we do the same calculation, add the 30%, I get $28.7 million. The temporary accommodation, take your point, that's an expensive one in the list here. And I looked and they allocated a certain amount for offices. And I thought, well, heck, we can take out that $650,000 that they say we need for offices because we've got the school. And the people in Vancouver wouldn't have known that, nor would they know about the school parking lot and other locations here where we may put those trucks. But conservatively, let's just take off the 650,000, multiply by 30%, 850,000. So I'm getting to a total of about $27.8 million. This might be difficult for people to follow, but you'll probably see where I'm going. Then we'll substitute in the Herald Engineering number, which is several $1 million less than the Hanscom paper exercise. So the engineers came by and looked at the building. I think they say on their documents, they actually examined it. So I'm going to suggest that the Herald Engineering are more accurate than the people who are in Vancouver flipping through the pages. So I think we can peel off the several $1 million in option 3.2 that way. So anyway, in the end, I get a subtotal of $25.5 million for option 3.2 and $31.4 million for option 1A. It switches if you look at total cost versus just the buildings themselves that we have estimates for right now. Those are big numbers. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the current firefighters and the services they provide. I think we all are in the very high standard they provide, the times and services, but I do want us to be thoughtful about the decisions we make and be aware of the differences in costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shukin.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Mr. Creek, I just direct you to page 4. And I had a question around contingencies. And I wanted to ask what the philosophy is in terms of the contingency amount that was put in here.
Through Chair, thank you. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go back to Councillor Gray's point there. On page 11, from the Hanscom engineering quote, on the Hanscom engineering report on page 11, their total cost was $16.4 million. So that's the first line in my table there, and then the 30% contingency on that is the 4.9, turning it into 21. If we put a 30% contingency on the contingency, maybe we're working with like a 60% contingency, which would be excessive. I've never built Firehall before, but it seems like doubling that up, because in their costing of that 16.4, they've already included inflation of 5% on costs for 2025 and 2026, assuming that we start construction in 2027. So it's like they've already worked in 30% costs in their 16.4. Then we added another 30% based on their note, resulting in the 21 million. So we're not, like, yeah, if there's $1 million worth of extra site costs for the paving and septic, then we'd be at 22, but we're certainly not at 26 or 30 million.
Perhaps the issue relates to the calculation of the contingency. That's what you're saying there. And there's a contingency within the 16.4 number. And then you've added an additional contingency of 30%.
Sure, correct. Yeah, based on that note that you referenced, where they say, because it's a Class D estimate, we're anywhere from plus minus 20 to 30. And lately it's been skewing higher, so then I just threw in 30% just because.
Right, my 30% is related to the, is different. It's not the contingency. I'm saying we're adding 30% because we're going to the top of range. So rather than 16.4, if you go to the top of the range, you have to add 30% to that. Then you add your contingency on top of that. The 30%, what they're talking about here is their estimate itself. I'd be happy to talk about it with you afterwards, but I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Through the chair, I'd have to challenge that one because they're saying it's 16.4 million, and then that extra note on page 11 says, hey, you should add plus minus 20 to 30%, and so that's where that 4.9 comes in to turn it into 21. To add 30% to the 16 plus another 30% to the 16, we're doubling up a contingency there.
Okay, well, maybe if you turn to page 21, you'll see the contingency there is 46%, already in the number of 16,429. So it's quite a few contingencies, I guess. The contingency of $5 million. That's within the 16. And then I'm saying we add another 30% to that, and you're saying that 30% is the contingency on page 4?
Correct. Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, that so the 30% of 16.429 is the 4.9. So when you take that 16.42.
Okay. So rather than a contingency, what's on page 4, that's simply you're bringing to the top end of the range.
Correct. Through the chair.
Right, not called contingency in the report, but you've labeled it such.
Yeah, so through the chair. So they've labeled their little contingency inside of it, which ends up being 40%, right? And then based on their note saying, hey, you should add plus minus 20 to 30%, I said, all right, I'll take 30% just to be conservative. So I add 16 plus the 4.9, result to 21.
Well, I think that's good news then. Thank you very much. That helps. And being labeled differently is not helpful for someone like myself who's trying to read through a financial document and understand what all of it means.
My apologies.
So we're still left with, though, if you include all costs, a higher cost for option 1A than option 3.2. The paving, the sewage, the drainage, and the admin and app bay code upgrades that will be required of us.
Through the chair, so option 1A would have all the upgrades to the apparatus bay, so that wouldn't be included. The issue with the Herald Engineering report related to the apparatus bay upgrades, that 900,000 number is solely to get the seismic upgraded. It doesn't include them taking anything out of that building, like the wiring, the HVAC, putting anything back inside of the building, and it doesn't get you up to WorkSafe BC standards. So that 900,000, like if you wanted to throw a 30% on that and say, okay, we're at 1.2, we're still ways off from what we're sitting at, the quality of building that we're sitting at with option 1A.
So now you're touching on something a little bit different, which is that we don't, as mentioned, I think the people in the audience as well, there's a note here, it says, council has seen the option presented in the engineer and architectural firms. And that's true, we have, but we haven't seen option 3.2. I've got here the Metchosin Firehall building assessment, and I've got these lovely pictures that sort of help you understand a little bit about what we're up to. And then there's some descriptions of option 1A in terms of how the building will be set up. But we have not seen option 3.2 yet. And so tonight we're being asked to look at option 3.2 and option 1A, but we haven't seen a description of 3.2 yet ourselves to make that kind of a judgment. And I guess that's partly what we're learning as you and I are talking about it. Well, the HVAC is included in one, but not in the other. So from my perspective, what's missing here is actually a comparison between option 1A and option 3.2. And I see that you've done a cost comparison, which is great. And I've just shown that the cost comparison isn't a total cost, but a partial cost, just the building, the cost D assessments. And now I guess I'm asking, could we have a description of option 3 that told us a little bit about what the difference is between it and option 1A, because I can't quite figure it out yet. And I have been studying the documents.
So through the chair. So option 1A, right, brand new guy on the land next to it. Option 3.2 ends up with tearing down the current admin building, rebuilding it, and then making the apparatus bay up to standard. where it currently stands.
Right, but I guess you say here in your conclusion, based on financial and operational analysis, option 1 is the most cost effective and operational advantageous choice. And I guess I get that as a conclusion, but I don't see the documents that explain that. In other words, where's the operational analysis? What's the difference between the two options in terms of delivering services? Are we meeting the same needs with both options? Are they both equal in all other ways except the finances? And that's got me a little bit uncertain about which way to go. As someone in the audience mentioned, if option 1 is the best option, well, let's go for it. But I don't have the information here. I don't believe my council mates have that information before us to make that kind of a decision tonight.
Councillor Shukin.
I am going to say that I am generally comfortable with the costing of option 3.2. I believe that in terms of where we're at with the feasibility assessment of the options presented, the information that can be gleaned from that, from the engineering reports, there is enough information to do, again, a Class D costing on that. So, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson?
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Shukin, can you tell me where in that package is 3.2? Because I've not been able to find the drawings either.
If you look at option 3.1, the concept is there. So I agree. It's
3.1,
yeah,
not 3.2?
Correct. Yeah, I'm not sure of what the difference is, but again, 3.1 is very similar. So again, we're talking about a Class D. We're talking about conceptual right now. So
through the chair, I do understand that. I just, to be informed, it's nice to actually know where to look in the document, and I've not seen anything that's 3.2, so hard to come informed to the table if I don't have all the information.
Right, so what, you're right, there's no 3.2 in here, the closest is a 3.1. And I imagine what staff was trying to address some of the concerns and some of the points where we were unified, that we needed a new administration building. So it's a brand new rebuild for the admin building and retrofitting the apparatus bay. So that is the main difference, it's not a total rebuild. 3.2 is not a total rebuild of the apparatus bay. The problem with that, as I see it, is we'll spend money to modify the existing structure, but it doesn't address the functional issues, the welfare and the safety issues. So the required exhaust system, the washrooms and the showers, the decontamination spaces, and the storage of the gear. So I see Councillor Gray, I'll get to you in a moment. It addresses the seismic upgrade, but it doesn't address what needs to go back into the building to make it a functional building and according to WorkSafe. So, for instance, they've got to take the roof off. They're not going to put the old lighting back. It'll all be new lighting. There'll be a new exhaust system, new washrooms, new decontamination spaces, and a new space for the storage of the gear. And in the many of the drawings, it talks about the spine of the building, and it's not that spine. That the spine is not included in this consideration.
So, Mayor Lilly, you're referring to the report from Herald Engineering, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Not the drawings of 3.2.
Well, I was referring to both, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just seems, again, as the public has indicated to us, we don't have all the information to have a fulsome discussion of what this all looks like. We've had reports back from JDA on 1A, but we haven't really explored the other options. And including now we have the Herald engineering report, and it does say there are certain things that are missing, because they only quoted us on the seismic upgrade and explained what that was about. And there are other examples of that across the region that other fire departments have done, including our neighboring Colwood Fire Department has done upgrades of an old building and still standing and have similar apparatus, but a much larger population and community and growing more than us. Again, getting back to, it's for myself, it would be great to have a little closer look at what our options are. We only have really one full report, and that's 1A. 3.2 or 3.1, as it turns out to be, still has components missing. So again, hard to compare completely what we're with all the information of, well, I guess as they say, apples and apples. Yeah.
Councillor Epp, then Councillor Gray.
Just I think I know I don't really feel I need a picture. I think that the starting on page 23, we have a Class D estimate for the layout of 3.2, which they have obviously looked into, and we pretty much know what that is going to look like if that's the option that ends up going forward. So I'm quite comfortable with this report.
Councillor Gray.
So I'm quite struck that we're being presented tonight two options, one of which that meets the needs of our department, and the other one, I think you just told us, doesn't have decontamination, doesn't have, isn't up to the standard of WCB, doesn't have gear storage. It's like, why is that being presented to us? What's it doing on the table tonight? I'm not clear. There's no description here. So coming into the meeting, I thought it had all of those things. And now you're saying, no, it doesn't. And that's why I'd like a description of what the option is that we're looking at. When I look at, and Councillor Shukin, you say it's like option 3.1. Option 3.1 has 4 apparatus bays, drive-through apparatus bays. Surely this isn't going to have 4 apparatus bays, or maybe it does.
So it's got 2 apparatus bays and 2 spines.
Yeah, which one? The new one or the old one? Or the 3.1 or which one?
Option 3.1.
Yeah, so 3.2, what does it have? When I look at it, and I, like Councillor Epp, I looked at the materials and I said, well, there's something. It's the same site. It's probably going to be 2 stories. But if you do the calculation of 2 stories, you find out that, and then you look at the document, you realize that there's an additional 764 square feet in option 3.2 as compared to 2 stories on the admin building and the existing apparatus bay. So it's, well, where are those 760, is it the same site or is it a different, is it bigger somehow? The description of it would be useful. And then I guess we heard from an audience member tonight, Klaus, who was saying, excuse me if I got that wrong, saying we should know what the options are and get a look at them in a serious way. I thought both options were going to meet our needs. And now we're hearing, no, one option doesn't. Okay, so we're not really looking at options just yet when we don't have a description of them. I would like to see, for example, a comparison of the 2 options that said this one will meet our needs of our firefighters. Everybody said we want to meet the needs of our firefighters in our community. I'd like to know what those needs are, and are we meeting them with this option or are we not? With each option and layout. I think part of the problem is we haven't yet to establish what the needs are that this project is intended to meet. I've taken it sort of through the vapors and stuff, but we haven't received a recommendation from the Firehall Steering Committee on either option. In fact, process-wise, the Firehall Steering Committee met last week. All these reports were available and they didn't go to the committee, and we have no recommendation from them tonight. And they're the ones who've been reviewing everything. It's a complicated situation. I also spoke to the CAO, who told me that there would be 4 options on the meeting tonight, and it turns out there are only 2. And then I look at the briefing note and it says, oh, if you want more options, you need to ask for it. Well, wait a minute. There were supposed to be 4 options, as I understood, from August 6th in my meeting. One was a new hall and apparatus bay on land next to the current fire hall. Another was a new fire hall in the current footprint with seismic and work-safe BC upgrades to the apparatus bay. The third option we were to look at was a new fire hall in the current footprint with work-safe upgrades to the apparatus bay. And the fourth, renovate the current fire hall and no changes to the apparatus bay or something like that. I don't think I got that noted properly. But so it's a bit disconcerting to find out that tonight, oh no, option 3.2 doesn't deal with the issues that we've been talking about. Why is it in that package?
So regarding the fire hall building assessment, the feasibility study, in section 2, it talks about the existing building and the site description. And then it does go on to talk about the needs analysis. So a needs analysis has been done. That's on the 4 preceding pages. And it does compare the existing fire hall and a future fire hall. And then it talks about the program deficiencies. So this is all we've had this before us now quite a few times. And then it goes on to the cost analysis and then the pros and cons of all of the different evaluations of keeping the apparatus bay, the cons and the pros for that. That is in the package. And then it goes on to the different design documents. And it ends with what the architects who design fire halls throughout the province, it is their preferred option was option 1A. And that's what we've asked them to do, is to do a fire hall an assessment, including all those components that I've mentioned, and to, since they are the professionals, bring forth an option. That option was presented, council voted to adopt option 1A. There were criticisms about the apparatus bay, and then staff in fairness said, well, okay, if you just want to build the administration building, the costs are broken down here. And I think the administration building works out to be 8.7 million plus some other site costs. That's on page 25. So even the administration building, we don't have enough money in our reserves to pay for it. So gets back to why we're here tonight, which is applying for a grant for the fire hall. So just the administration building alone will be south of $9 million based on the executive summary of the Metchosin Fire Hall provided by Hanscom.
Without having any of the required things we want in it, you have informed us tonight. I just want to point out, this isn't a feasibility study, this is a Metchosin Fire Hall building assessment. We haven't yet seen the feasibility study. This is a building assessment, it's labeled like that. And what it's done is it's made some comparisons with the existing apparatus bay and how it might address some modernization and seismic and that sort of thing. But we don't have a list of the actual needs that the fire department need. When reading through some of the letters, they were saying, be sure to listen to your fire department. We haven't heard from the fire department yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to maybe pull out a little bit and speak more broadly. There have been a number of comments from the audience today, from community members today, about how everybody agrees that we need a new fire hall, and which I take to mean apparatus bay and administrative building. I'm going to say I doubt that. I doubt that everyone agrees with that. And the one thing I will say is, in terms of context, as is the need to do something with the Firehall has been known for over a decade now, and it has only come up now, these flags of support. When it's incredibly unfortunate, because we may well have been able to build something like a Cumberland Fire Department for around that price if we had simply acted when we knew around where the need was. So again, what I'm seeing again and again is an attempt to delay and defer a decision. And if we do not act on an option in the next 4 weeks here, we are likely, there was a comment made earlier about multiple intakes for the grant per year. No, we're talking about a grant program that is spread over 10 years, and we may see other intakes. We likely will, but we don't know when those are. So if we delay in the next little while, we're likely going to be holding off building a new hall until 2030 at the very earliest. And again, based on some of the comments in the community, there is an aversion to even considering borrowing, and that is likely to be an impact on decision makers in the future as well. So I'm sensing that not only are we the potential of a new hall being, if we don't make a decision now, into moving to 2030, but beyond that as well. And that is something I do not believe that we should contemplate or encourage or facilitate. The one thing I'm sorry, I believe this thing about understanding the firefighters' needs, that's a bit of a red herring. We have had the members of the Fire Hall Steering Committee, past retirees, current members, and also the chief. And we thought, if Chief Dunlop thought that there was something going astray, we would have heard from her. I've spoken to her a number of times about the way ahead. I've heard nothing in terms of red flags with this. What I believe, I'm going to echo what Mr. Aubrey said before, is, and other members of the audience, I believe that we need to move ahead with this grant. We will have time to refine the concept, refine the cost, hear from others in the community. And so, Mayor Little, with that, I'm going to move that council support a District of Metchosin application to the UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund for up to $7 million in grant funding for the preferred option, Program Layout 1A in the Johnson-Davidson Architecture Metchosin Building Assessment Report dated May 28, 2025, quote, to construct a new fire hall on proposed new site, and that the District of Metchosin will provide overall grant management and support to a successful grant application. And further, that the district has received a Class D construction cost estimate for the preferred option, Program Layout Option 1A, and will support any cost overruns to the project. So moved.
This is moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Epp. More discussion. I think, go ahead, Motivate, and Councillor Epp, and then I'm going to ask our CAO to weigh in.
Yeah. One thing I will mention, I very much appreciate Mr. Rand speaking and talking about the philosophy of the no debt policy. And I understand that that has worked over time to a point. And the one thing I will, but somebody else mentioned this too, what it did though is it deferred investment in some of the community's most important assets. Number one, the fire hall. Now, what I see is, it having been in the seat for a number of years now, first term, and I try and be as humble as possible in terms of my knowledge and understanding of this job. But what I have seen in the community are time bombs. Time bombs that exist figuratively, but also literally in terms of their potential to cause damage physically and infrastructure-wise. The fire hall is one of them. Again, the admin building is a 1960s building built with unreinforced masonry concrete. It is one of the most dangerous structures in terms of earthquake. And we've known this for some time, and we have not acted on it. That is one of these time bombs. Go up the street, the Flesh Road Bridge. I was just reviewing the information there. There's a report from 2006 saying some of the ballast walls in the bridge are decaying, and we did not invest in that. The trees on Lombard Lane, they are a danger, and we have not, they've been allowed to grow for umpteen decades. Again, these are time bombs, and it is time to start investing in addressing them. So again, I am, of course, very aware that we're spending community money, but there are needs out there that do need to be addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Epp.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. First is I do have to say how disheartened I've been by the personal attacks and the derogatory comments posted on social media recently over the Firehall issue. I really wonder how those same people would feel if it was themselves or members of their family being tarred and feathered on Facebook. And then as far as the ALR, as Ms. Kakabula pointed out, I did vote to remove all the land on this area from the ALR. And that wasn't anything to do, personally, with development at all. I was just thinking about all the hoops the Cricket Association had to jump through just to get one little paved area to improve their cricket pitch because of the ALR. Other covered, the Equestrian Society would like some covered stalls out there. Again, it was just an idea that this is our area of our municipal facilities, not a housing development. Many of the people that are opposed, have been opposed to the idea of taking land out of the ALR for the Firehall are long-term residents from what I've seen, as I am. And I don't remember, and I'm able to find out the exact dates of our municipal hall, the parking lot, and the driveway when they were constructed on ALR land. But I would be really interested to know how those same residents who were here responded at that time and how the council of the day handled it. So one of the interesting things I think that Mr. Creek brought up was about the square footage of fire halls anyways being built as far as the Crest facility, and particularly I think the Hans Helgeson Child Care Center being built. You know, our building inspector reported that the new daycare center, which is 4,747 square feet, is going to cost $6,950,000. He said there's probably $1 million of that would be for outdoor improvement. So if you deduct that from the total, it still works out to $1,253 a square foot. And that's a current building in our neighborhood that's being built. And I think comparing that with some of the other square footage costs that I've looked up on other fire halls, you know, that's about the going rate. Unfortunately, I think it would be terrific if you know, we could do it for much less, but I just don't think it's realistic. I think as far as the debt-free idea, I think it's been great. I mean, living here all these years, we've had low taxes, we haven't gone into debt, but now we're faced with this, and I mean, we have to do something with this fire hall. We don't have any choice on that. I mean, as found out, was it yesterday that parts of the ceiling fell off again? You know, we just have to do something about that. And I think it's too bad for past councils, because I don't think anybody would have forecasted the huge, tremendous increase that we've had in costs, particularly construction costs that really took off unbelievably during COVID and have just continued. And given the reserves we had, I think as one of the residents mentioned, like we won't unfortunately ever be able to catch up as far as I can see. You know, we don't want to deplete every single penny we have in our reserves to try to fund this fire hall, because the buildings on this property, all of our buildings are aging, and there isn't enough money to replace them or upgrade them or whatever. We just simply don't have it. So as much as it's you know, not a great thing to think about going into debt or getting a loan, I think And we're going to have higher taxes. I mean, I don't want to see this place developed like Langford or Colwood. I certainly don't, because I love Metchosin the way it is. And I think we're going to be looking at higher taxes. We're going to have to probably get a loan to pay for this fire hall. I mean, if we don't, great, but we're going to have to get money from somewhere to replace buildings because we don't have enough money going into our reserves or in our reserves to look to the future to replace the aging buildings that we have. So, you know, I think it's just a kind of a nasty fact of life that we're going to have to change our perspective a bit. And I do support option 1 to go ahead and look for the grant. I think this is just as we've said many times, it's just a starting point. This is only the beginning of the discussion, but as Councillor Shukin pointed out, if we keep putting it off, which is what has been put off and put off and put off for many years, it's just going to get worse. The problem is just going to get more difficult and more expensive.
Okay, thank you. CAO Payette, I was wondering if you could address some of the issues if we don't build a fire hall, if we don't rebuild it, what state are we in? Following up on Councillor Shukin's comments, could you comment on that and give us some guidance?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Little. So staff, as you know, we do our best to stay objective as possible. And bring forward the facts as we're requested or required to do. And that's what we've endeavored to do. And CFO has done his best to bring forward, as a chartered accountant, as accurate information as he can. I did want to applaud the steering committee. It is a thankless job to get through the amount of information that they got through the feasibility study. And the feasibility study is essentially built on a space analysis. The space analysis and the requirements of the fire department were provided by our most expert person, is the fire chief. And that provided the architect with the best information that we could garner for a Class D estimate. A Class D estimate, as everyone knows here, is our best guess. It's the most accurate information we can get from the best professionals we can afford to get a space analysis feasibility conducted. And that's what we've done. The feasibility study requirements were to bring forward the best option, and the best option was presented by the architect. The grant application process, as you know, there are experts in here, of course, on grant submissions, is a pragmatic process. And we've done our best review of the grant application submission and our best possible scenario. And I believe that we have a better than a 50% chance of garnering $7 million for this municipality. There are over 100 other municipalities that are going to get $7 million. It would be nice to bring $7 million to Metchosin, I assure you. That would be a nice day. We're in competition for that grant. So our grant application needs to be as solid as possible. Municipality needs to check each of the boxes that are required in the grant application to the best possible standard. So, for example, the financial requirement is that the municipality can support the construction of a fire hall. And we have to prove that in the grant application. And to prove that, we will deplete reserves to match the grant, and then we will have to find funding to top up whatever the project costs, including overruns. The question about overrunning municipality accepting the cost of overruns is a yes or no question. And if you say no, you fail. That's why in the presentation tonight, and as everybody knows, we have to commit to the overruns or we will not get that grant. The ministry will not accept overruns on projects. So we've done our homework on the application to the best of our abilities. We believe we have a fairly strong opportunity to garner that grant funding. One of the other check boxes is, has your municipality received strategic priority funds in the past? No, we have not. That's a big plus for Metchosin. A lot of other municipalities over the past years have received grant funding through this stream for other projects. So we'll have a little notch above those municipalities because we have not received our piece of the pie yet. So all that being said, put our best foot forward. Let's get together on this. Let's get that grant, and then let's deal with it when we know our full funding envelope. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so does anybody else want to comment? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. I just want to say that the members of the Firehall Steering Committee met just a few times this year, started to go through the space analysis, but unfortunately that never did complete the process. Before it was, we had an announcement of grant and our June 11th meeting was canceled, so therefore that dialogue never happened. So it appears to me that this has all been taken back to the consultant, JDA, and they actually made the recommendation to council to do the 1A, not the Firehall Steering Committee. Having said that, there was a great deal of discussion on the documents that we could read because the fonts weren't big enough at some of those meetings. And it was interesting for me because I'm not in the fire service, never have been, but I've been affiliated through generations of members of my family, including my father this morning texted me from his hospital bed about stay strong. This is really important. You know what firefighters are about. And yes, I do. And I would have to say, I don't think there's anybody at this table that is saying, let's not continue providing service to our community and keeping people safe, including our firefighters and the people that live here. Nobody has suggested that that will happen. We have an operating department. We are meeting the grade of all the NFPAs and the different codes, et cetera, et cetera. The fire chief has been very astute about doing that over the years to make sure we have the appropriate equipment and people trained and in the right place. And yes, there have been some deficiencies in the building as part of it is getting very, very old. And as a person who also has been applying for grants and realizing details are very important, and to be honest with those details, as the CAO has just said, you need to put the appropriate pieces in there to be convincing. And I guess that's where I am today, is I still don't feel I have enough information, especially when I'm listening to the constituents who ultimately will make the decision on what the finances will be for this. Cumberland is a textbook example of working within a budget. We have a similar sized community, except that they have a commercial entity, they have ecotourism, they are fast growing. We are not. We just had a housing projection from from our planner based on the provincial calculator of 800 dwellings built out in 20 years. So we're going from the size of Firehall we have now to almost 4 times the size. And I question why we would need something so big that's going to cost us so much more, that maybe we should consult with Cumberland, who is growing, but went with something within the means that they need. Next door to us is Colwood. they're 20,000 and fast growth, have a department that's not much difference in apparatus, not configuration, but what they can house. And they've done a seismic upgrade. It's obviously not going to be forever. They will have to do something as well. So for me, it's about more information. I'm sorry if that's a pain in some people's sides, but it's important to be able to answer the constituents. Right now, I don't have all the information I need to answer them. And when I hear a plea to, really reconsider what the finance part is, and I'm not against applying for grants. I certainly think that that's a very valid proposition for us to be seeking. But we're going with the biggest, most expensive, and as I said in June, to be pigeonholed into one option. If that's the only one that we're going to have for this particular grant, then that's what my colleagues, majority, will have voted on. I don't see that being the best service for our community. My concern is the debt load, and we may have to borrow, but do we need to borrow $20–30 million? That is unclear. I do think that we haven't done our due diligence at this point.
Okay. So for the constituents that are interested in the Mitchells and Firehall building assessment, this is dated May of this year. The needs analysis is on page 7 to 10, as well as the program deficiencies, the comparison between a future fire hall and what we have here. So it's all in the reports. I'm hoping that in September we will be able to have an open house, and I would ask the Healthy Communities Committee to help us with that, to make it a positive event that we can present everything that is in this fire hall feasibility study. And also we asked the professionals for their opinion. This is what they've given us. We've asked them for the preferred option. It wasn't incumbent only on the Fire Hall Steering Committee to bring forth what is the preferred option. It was the professionals. We asked for their opinion, they gave it. And that was option 1A. Regarding the so this is the preferred option. It's the least expensive option according to our CFO, and it carries significant less risks of cost overruns. To me, to spend money on modifying an existing structure that doesn't address the functional issues is not good enough. Seismic upgrade, that's wonderful. But if it doesn't address everything else, we need to have that as well. The guidelines in the grant requires the municipality to include the feasibility study with an identified preferred option. And Councillor has already identified that preferred option of 1A. It's clear from the reports that renovation of the buildings will cost more than it would be for a complete rebuild. And as pointed out by a member of our community earlier, Council did adopt in 2023 that declaration of climate emergency and biodiversity crisis, and in quotations, municipal governments can and should make decisions and adopt policies that will prepare the community and mitigate climate change and negative climate change related events. This project is a priority area, and it should be viewed through the emergency and biodiversity crisis lens. It's a fact that we have insignificant capital reserve to rebuild the fire hall. We don't have enough money. If the fire hall had been, at least the administration building, had been rebuilt in the late 80s when we have documents that say it's unacceptable in its current form. That was in, I think, 1987 or 89. It would have cost a fraction of what it costs now. And it's a reality what it is going to cost. We know that, as Councillor Epp stated, the recently completed Crest building, which is designed to secure and make resilient communications for first responders. So it's not for first responders, it's for the communication systems. For that, it costs $16 million. It's just over 13,000 square feet. The cost was $1,198 per square foot. So I think the estimates that have been given by the professionals that we asked are within the cost if we do it now. If we do it in 5 years, the costs go up. They're not going to go down. In the question that we're asked to address today is about the grant. So in order to reduce the potential tax burden on residents, it's clear that all potential funding opportunities should be pursued. These funds have already been committed. So they've committed $125 million. Personally, I would much prefer that Metchosin receive the $7 million. I'm biased. I would rather us get the $7 million rather than another community. And as Councillor Shukin says, further delays in the project only transfers the problem to the next council at higher costs for future generations. And I really do maintain that applying for the grant is a prudent step. It is not the last step before shovels are in the ground. It's definitely not the last step. We're going to have a lot of discussion. We're going to have open houses. We're going to have more discussion about how we proceed, but we can't proceed without knowing what our financial picture is. And until we receive word on, are we going to get 7 million or not, we won't know. We won't be able to make final decisions until we know what our financial picture is. And most communities in building a fire hall do not have adequate reserves, and they've needed to go and borrow money for that. And so I understand that that is a reality. So I recommend to council that you be in favor of staff applying for this grant to reduce the potential tax burden. Okay. Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I just want to say that I too am sorry about the derogatory comments that have been made, I guess, on social media and wherever else they might be occurring. But I think, too, there's a fairness issue when we raise questions from this side of the table to say, hey, could we describe these options or find out what the options are? And the response comes back, well, you're delaying. No, really what means they can't answer the question. So just say, I can't answer the question. I'd like to proceed without knowing. So I'm just a bit frustrated with the idea that I came at the beginning and said, look, we've decided option 1A. What the heck is option 3.2 on the paper? And it's kind of, we go through the process and people say, no, we want you to consider option 3.2. Then we get to option 3.2 and it's not really an option. It's a fake option. It doesn't meet our needs. What's it here for? So you're sort of playing with us in a council, and it doesn't feel very good to be in that position. I am not interested in delaying the project particularly. What I am committed to is providing the best fire hall we can for our firefighters, one that meets their needs and serves our community well, while staying within what our taxpayers can reasonably afford. I understand many families, including those on fixed incomes, are feeling financial pressure. And I want to ensure any investment is both responsible and sustainable for everyone in our community. And I'm not convinced at this point, the council has adopted option 1A. And I've asked a couple of times about this. You're saying, somebody is saying, it's in the letters, and I think it's been said at the table, this isn't the final decision. Again, well, where is the final decision? You're going to get a grant and then we're reconsidering. What's the open house about? Is the open house about option 1A, or are we bringing forward a series of different options to discuss them? Maybe you could tell me that. I just don't understand the process at all. All of this was meant to start, as everybody I think knows, the steering committee was going to lay out a roadmap in 2022. The first task was a roadmap to lay out all of what we're about to do. And without that roadmap, I'm quite, I don't know what street I'm on even.
Councillor Shukin.
I will agree to some degree with Councillor Gray. I do agree that the process has not been optimal. I wish we maybe would have been at this stage last year, and again, been in a good position to apply for a grant. And there's maybe many reasons why. I will note that the Firehall Steering Committee met, I think it was twice in 2022. They were appointed in April of 2022, met twice in 2022, 23, 24, and they've been meeting clearly more now. So we probably collectively didn't understand the urgency around all this. But the one thing that is driving my decision is the need to act. And option 1A is here as a conceptual cost. The cost estimate is in some ways conceptual. We'll be able to streamline the building based on needs. But I just don't believe that the needs of our firefighters have not been incorporated into this building. The one thing I do want to say, and again, this goes back to time, and I really believe it was a mistake by past councils to not build the admin building, to not take that on in an era where building was far more cost effective, far more simple. The example of Cumberland has come up a number of times, and I took the opportunity to speak to a councillor with the village of Cumberland. And when I talked to him, it was kind of funny. He sort of laughed when he heard my interest, and it wasn't a laugh about, oh, you're in a bad position. It was a laugh of how fortunate the people of Cumberland were to have done what they did in the time. So they would have completed, substantive completion I think would have been in 2020, but they were underway well before that. And again, that day and age has probably left us. In case in point, he mentioned a wastewater treatment plant that they're building in Cumberland. The original estimate was 8 million around 2020, 2021. It's now 20 million. So nobody is immune to that. And if we delay again, and again, folks who are concerned about cost, they should be encouraging us to move ahead with the grant. We can streamline and focus the building as we move along, but acting now is critical.
Councillor Gray.
So I just want to point out, nobody's talking about delay. September 12th is a deadline. We've got staff here. I would have been interested in, for example, asking the people to flesh out option 3.2 so we knew what it was and make our decision before September 12th. The problem is we've got a motion on the table, so we're not going to do that. I think that some others might say, is this the right time to do this given the tariffs and the terrible financial situation we're in? 150 people lost their job at VHA, some of them are in Machosen. How are they going to, there's a lot going on right now. I'm not sure this is the right time either. Those things may change going forward. I don't know. But my point would be to apply for the grant, but with eyes open. Sort of the problem for me is that we seem to have got to this place because we rushed to a grant. We haven't finished the feasibility study. We're working on part way along, haven't got the options fleshed out. I don't see in the contract, by the way, a requirement to recommend a particular option. I'll go through the contract again, but I don't see it there. We were going to study all of that, and I thought come together, and it'd be kind of quite a fun experience. We talk about it, look at the needs, have discussion about it, and then we'd be all ready with figured out which option we like together, and then we'd also figure out, oh, we are going to go into the AR land, or we're not. If we are, we'd be a commission, get the answer, and we go to the group in UBCM and ask them, we're ready now to apply for a grant. Now we're trying to figure out what is it we would get, what do we need to put in our thing to get a grant? I don't think that's a proper way to proceed. So I have a different issue, I guess, which is the grant application itself, and I'm concerned about a bad faith or at least highly problematic application if we proceed. The requirement is that we cover all cost overruns, but the cost of the project and the available reserves suggests we're taking on debt. We've all seen the numbers. We're shooting kind of high because I misunderstood the documents, but still, it looks like we might be expending, well, if we take the option here that we had $21 million, and let's say we have $6 million in reserve if we don't clear the cupboards of it entirely. So we take $6 million. What's 21 minus 6? Help me out, you guys. $15 million. So I guess we say, well, we can't. We could do that by going into debt for $15 million. If we clean out all of our reserve money that's available for the purpose, and didn't have the money then to repair other assets in our community, which will leave us a bit, I guess, looking for more money and going into further debt at a different time if we had a problem, as laid out in the CFO's note. We need $13 million. Okay, so we look at $13 million and we say, well, golly, let's do that over 30 years. And if you look at the numbers here, that would be something like 600, where's the number? It's a heck of a lot of money that we would be coming in every year. I've got it here written down here somewhere. What I'm worried about is we're only able to borrow $13 million over 30 years without electoral approval. We haven't gone to the community, and you guys want us to commit, or it sounds like, are asking us to commit to cover all cost overruns, but that might be subject to a referendum. So are we at risk of misrepresenting our authority? We're saying, well, we can cover it. No, you can only cover 13 million without going to the community. So we've not yet secured the legal or electoral authority to take on a debt more than $13 million. And yet you guys someone is prepared, movers and seconders presumably, to agree to do that. And I just worry that we're misrepresenting our authority to a granting agency. And would that invalidate our application or expose the district to any liability? The next would be the concern of doing this would be the potential breach of fiduciary responsibility. We have a duty to act prudently, transparently, in the best interest of taxpayers, and committing to obligations that push the district into debt without approval of our community. That's if it's over $13 million, then that risks binding the district to a financial outcome that it can't legally responsibly fulfill. Granted, I was thinking the numbers were higher than, when I was thinking about this before, but I still see the risk there that this motion has us committing to something that we're not actually capable of doing. And that says to me that we're misrepresenting our authority. So I see that as quite problematic, obviously, and I would have appreciated a financial plan from the CFO rather than the background information we got today, an actual plan that said, if we get $7 million, here's what it looks like. If we get $0, that's what it looks like. If we get, the average running 200 grand, what does it look like? And then we could have said, oh yeah, we can do that. We've got 13 million. We don't have to go to the public for it. We can sign that document. But if those numbers come out and it says to us instead that we don't get any money from them, let's say, then we're stuck at $50 million. Where are we going to come up with it from? We can't properly say that we have that money. We can't properly agree this motion. So I can't vote for the motion, not because of the desire, like Mr. Aubry wants us to do it tonight. I can't do it because the motion doesn't allow me to with the information I have about our financial situation and the information the CFO has given us. I see that as problematic.
Okay. You sort of lost me with your calculations there, but what
I
I'll
can come
go
back to
back
it.
to, what I'll go back to is the financial implications presented by our CFO, as well as the summaries and the information provided by Hanscom. So they've done many of these. I think they've been doing this kind of work since the 1960s. So they're the experts in doing cost considerations and cost analysis, in predicting what the cost escalations will be, and the taxes and the schedules. So that's what we've asked them for empirically. That's what the CFO has reiterated here. And he has noted what it doesn't include, including the demolition of the site, in the breakdown of the differences. I will vote in favor of the motion to apply for this grant. I think this is really important for this community. And what I do fear is if we don't apply for it, then some people that are not in favor of rebuilding the fire hall will say, well, you don't have the money. You didn't even apply for this grant. So and why councils haven't proceeded with this in the past? Well, because this has been so difficult. It's difficult, and you have to be brave. And it is decisions that we are taking on through no fault of our own. The costs are what they are. This is what the needs of the fire hall is. And so they haven't taken it on because it's very difficult and divisive. So I applaud all of you at the table for at least wanting to have these conversations. And they are imperfect. I admit the process hasn't been perfect. I wish the process could have been better, but it hasn't. But at this point, I think our best next step in the series of steps is to apply for this grant.
So maybe I can help you understand. You weren't understanding what I said. Option 1A, through the expert costing people you've referenced, say this will cost $21,358.30. Sorry, thank you. $21,358,350. If we use all of our reserves available to us, as advised by, relayed to us by our CFO, that's about $8 million. That means $13 million needs to be borrowed. In order to agree this, it suggests to me that you're saying, I can approve that, or I can sign on to this. You're comfortable with that number. So you're saying I can sign the document because I don't have to go to a referendum. I don't have to go an alternative approval process. I know I can get the money right now from this council. You can get the $13 million borrowed over 30 years at a cost of, I think it's something like $660,000 per year tax increase of. That's in the our later documents, I guess, which we aren't talking about till later. A 29% tax increase. So we have like a 29% tax increase. You could pull it off without going to the public. Is that the plan, without going to the public? Or is your plan that you would go to the public regardless? You won't borrow any money without going to the public?
I guess what you're forgetting is the reason why we're going through that exercise is because of the $7 million grant. You haven't calculated that into if we're successful with the $7 million grant.
I'm saying if you weren't successful. I'm talking about good faith here.
Well, if we're not successful, that doesn't tie us to anything. We're back to evaluating. No, we're not. We're not. We're not. If we don't get the grant, we'll assess based on our financial position and the needs of the fire hall. We will reassess and we'll pivot. So obviously, that's obvious. If we don't have the money, we could go to a referendum and ask for 13 million. that is one of the options. And some people in the community may be against that. Some people may be for that. But the reason why we're going through all of this is to apply for the grant. What I am told is unlikely that they will give 2 or 3 million or hundreds of thousands. They give 7 million or not. And I think we have a very good chance of getting this grant, because one of the major requirements is to have the feasibility study. You know how long it took for the JDA to come up with this feasibility study based on the needs assessment provided by the needs provided by the fire chief and the needs assessment. So a lot of communities would like to rebuild their fire hall, but they don't have this. This requires months, if not a year's worth of work. We have this in hand. If we wait and apply at the next intake in a couple of years, we'll have to have a reassessment, because some of the figures will need to be rejigged to the current standards. I think we have a very good chance of the grant based on what we've got available, that other communities don't have this readily available.
And I guess I wasn't suggesting, of course, if we don't get any money, but I was thinking, when we look through all the grants, or one of the residents did, the numbers were like 200 from 200 grand, 300 grand. A couple of places got in the millions. It was 2 million or 3 million, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking about that, about how are we making the commitment, and how do we access this money, not having gone through the referendum, not having actually done the financial work you're referring to. Last time we talked about this, I think I correctly understood that there was a limit to that. I asked, what's the off-ramp for option 1A? And the response was the level of debt. And I recall asking Councillor Shuk and then withdrawing my question, because it wasn't really fair, because we didn't have the analysis. Now we have the analysis about the debt and about how it all works. And I thought we might discuss that before now, but do you have a sense of the level of debt you're prepared to go to before there's an off-ramp? Because again, you're making a financial commitment here. So do you have that number tonight?
Councillor Shukin.
I just want to reiterate what you had said before, Mayor Little. If we will need to wait for the results of the grant and, build our financial plan around that, what we actually get and the need. So in between now and then, I'm expecting we are going to refine the plan. We're likely to get another estimate. We'll have a truer sense of cost. And then once we learn the result of the grant program and where we sit with that, we will be able to do a financial analysis. I'm not going to speculate on what I think we, may, be my debt threshold, or even if I would consider, I will consider borrowing for sure. And I take Councillor Gray's point that, again, if we're committing to cost overruns, that is probably an option we need to explore. But in terms of how much, way too early to talk about that right now. So, and one other thing too, I don't think we should belabor the topic anymore about how much we're prepared in the financial analysis. We will know more, and we'll be able to talk about it in a much more real basis, a much more educated basis once we learn the result of the grant. So,
Councillor Donaldson or Councillor Epp, do you wish to weigh in? No. Okay. So go ahead, Councillor Gray.
So that's helpful for me to know that tonight we don't have a really sense of how much money we might borrow. We'll wait until we hear from it. And then back to my question, are we all in agreement that option 1A is not a final decision tonight? We're just looking at a grant. Can I ask where that sits?
The option 1A is a decision that we need for the grant. My preference would be 1A. However, my preference and my decision will be based on our financial position. And if we get the grant, we can go one way. If we don't get the grant, we'll have to go another way. So I can't speculate right now because I don't know what our financial position will be. If we don't get the grant, well, we have reserves of 7 to 8 million, which is not enough compared to or in relation to what we've being presented. So if we don't have enough reserves, we would have to borrow that extra 2 to 3 million to complete the administration building alone.
Right, and rather than looking at the scenarios tonight before we agree to do cost overruns, you're happy not to have the information, it sounds like.
Well,
You're
I
content to
accept what
proceed
has
without
been. I
information.
accept what has been given to us, and I accept them. The numbers from the professionals, absolutely.
Thank you. I had a different issue that I'd like to raise before the motion comes forward, and that's in the correspondence we received something caught my eye here. It's from Sherry Rourke, and she points out that volunteers have every right to seek union representation to improve their working conditions. She writes, if our fire department were to unionize, we'd lose volunteers, and what would the annual salary cost be? And she makes a comparison with North Saanich as a unionized fire department with salaries that, for a similar sized population, but salaries or, golly, this is just salaries. Well, their salaries are $500,000 more than our entire operational cost of our firefighters, I believe. So I think that she's correct that we should be thinking about this. Paid on-call firefighters, the suggestion is they'll unionize if we don't do the building. That's what Reed says here. If our fire department were to unionize, we would lose the annual salaries. If conditions remain inadequate, our volunteers have every right to seek unionization. And I'm just interested in that because it seems to me that paid on call alongside full-time firefighters, there's lots going on in our region. So Langford and Colwood, they got paid on-call firefighters, then they moved to full-time, and I think they may be both going to full-time across the piece. North Saanich, the one referenced here, they're organized under the IAFF, that's the firefighters union, and the paid on-call group are unionized along with the full-time people. And then here in Metchosin, we have CUPE, and our paid on-call are not unionized. So I think maybe it doesn't have to do so much with our decision tonight, or upcoming decision, or decision we made a few weeks ago. Rather, it's a trend that's out there that may well come to us regardless of our decision here. And because IAFF unionization has improved wages and benefits. And by the way, no criticism of our firefighters if they choose to do this. This is completely up to them. But we have no plan to deal with that. And as I say, I think the cost, it's like $500,000 increase or a 16% tax increase just for that. As management, of course, we need to accept that, but it would throw us, I think, into a question of having some discussion. Well, I'm reminded by the CFO notes, we might be forced to reduce or alter services as one solution, versus a big tax increase. I'm not suggesting it at all, and I just think that we should be aware of it. What would we do? Would we move back to a volunteer fire force? That's pretty tough. I'm not imagining that, but we'd have to figure out what to do with such a hefty tax increase that may be in front of us. Of course, we have a volunteer firefighting force. We don't need dormitories. We're building a firefall with dormitories. We don't actually have a master plan, at least I'm not aware of one for a fire department, which defines our needs in the context. It just seems so much of the project that we're undertaking here is we're missing details, and we should be thinking about them before we make commitments in particular.
Okay, so the letter that Councillor Gray is referring to is on page 31, 32. What I think, without speaking for her, I think what Miss Rourke is saying is, if we don't go for option 1A, if we don't apply for the grant, and this has been disruptive to the firefighters so far, they may seek other options. She also goes on to say, if the district could not maintain its own fire department, what would it be to service costs to contract to our neighboring communities like Colwood and Langford for our fire? That would be absolutely detrimental for our community, because much of what the fire department does is first responding, not just structure fires. And so that's what I suspect she's laid out what her preference would be, which is in the second paragraph, the new build option 1A. And if we don't proceed with building the new fire hall, what are we up against? And I think that's and these are very valid comments and concerns that I share. But I get back to what we are supposed to be addressing. It is the grant application. Do we want to apply for $7 million to offset the costs? We know that the administration part of the fire hall, we've known since the late 80s that it is unacceptable. We know that at least that will need to be rebuilt, and we don't have enough reserves to do that. I suggest we apply for the grant to help us proceed so that we don't delay, because any delays will be increased costs and exponential costs, perhaps based on what Cumberland is facing right now with their wastewater treatment plant that they thought would cost $7 million and now is going to cost 22. Did you say 20?
Yeah.
So does anybody else want to speak about the motion? Yes, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'll just say that I too want to access grant money to support the community. And it seems to me that there's time now to do a couple of things, and that would be to look at some serious options, and have and also the financial implications. So without a clear description of what we're up to in terms of options, I find it difficult to approve option 1A, because I see that as we'd already decided that a few weeks ago. We decided tonight. The idea that this isn't a final decision, I think, is difficult for me to understand how we would move away from it. And the second issue is that not knowing the financial implications themselves makes it very difficult to vote for this. And I'm quite concerned about the good faith question in terms of overruns.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak? I'm going to call the question. The motion, to remind you, is option 1 on page 1 of your agenda. This is to proceed with the District Metchosin application to the UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund for up to $7 million. So we're clear on what we're voting on. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Gray, Councillor Donaldson opposed. Thank you. Let's move along to the next component. This is the staff report, and this is for our information. Of course, we can discuss it, but we're not to come to any conclusions to move business forward on this. This is for our information only. CFO Creek, could you come to the microphone and give us your report? Thank you. On page 43 of the agenda package.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Through the chair. So this is a report about debt financing. It's been brought up in regard to the fire hall due to the enormous cost of the options that have been presented. And then also the last Firehall Steering Committee, it was mentioned, hey, should we have a comparison about debt to inflation, as was mentioned earlier in the public participation. And so we'll get into it. So as a municipality, we're legislated by the community charter and the municipal liabilities regulation on what we could do with debt. So number one, total debt servicing costs cannot exceed 25% of our annual calculation revenue from the previous year. Based on 2024, that'd be about $2.2 million a year. Number two, municipality does not need to seek public approval if debt servicing costs do not exceed 10% of the annual calculation revenue from the previous year, which is $884,000. And then number three, the municipality can borrow $150 per capita in the municipality without seeking public approval if repaid within 5 years for capital projects, and that comes out to $760,000 based on the 2021 census. So since our last kind of report about Firehall financing on June 16th, the province increased the applicable rate from 5% to 10%, which is how we end up with that $884,000. And that's mostly because of these construction costs that have just escalated more rapidly than anybody would have thought. So in order to not have to deal with the time lapse and the cost of having a referendum or going through AAP, province said, hey, if your total debt servicing costs are less than 10%, have at it. You know what you need for capital infrastructure. We're not going to delay it for a year or two because that's just going to add even more cost to it. So going into that, public approval. So if you end up borrowing more than either option 2 or 3, you can either do an alternative approval process or a referendum. So a referendum generally takes, if you're not going to include it with the election, anywhere from 3 to 4 months. Costs more than a AAP process, which takes about 2 months. Public participation is all through voting for a referendum, AAP, there's a petition signed. The referendum has a binding outcome. If fewer than 10% of people object to the AAP, then that also becomes binding. If the referendum fails, they can go for another vote. If the AAP process fails, you can go to either referendum or abandon the project. That was kind of seen in Saanich. Their operations facility was defeated by the AAP process. And now they're thinking of, okay, what do we do now? Like I was just talking to their CFO. Turns out they didn't even need AAP process because that 5 to 10% bump. But now they're at a point where, well, public said no, they don't want to go against it. So they're kind of saying, how are we going to piecemeal this project now? Because they do need a new operations facility for their parks and garbage, public works, etc. As a municipality in BC, we have to borrow our money through the Municipal Finance Authority, which is a pretty good deal for us. They've got a AAA bond rating. They are able to provide low-cost loans to all municipalities. They also hold a number of investments for us as well. And when I wrote up the report, there's a table there showing what the interest rate is on the loans from 5 years to 30 years. There's been some slight increases in those as interest rates aren't seeming to come down anytime soon. Things I get from the banks and that type of thing, they're saying there might not be any more cuts for the rest of the year. Some people say there will be one more. Who knows? Nobody can predict. And so below that, we got another table showing, hey, if we borrowed $1 million, what is this going to cost us over a 5-year period to a 30-year period? So, of course, a whole lot more money coming in if we borrow it only over 5 years, a whole lot less if we borrow over 30 years. So ranging from a tax increase of $106 down to $32. And then kind of diving into what a resident mentioned was, if your inflation rate is 10% and your interest rate is 5%, it's actually, you're earning money by basically borrowing at the 5% versus the 10%, just because the 5 minus the 10, hey, you're in negative 5%. So I've got an interest rate example here. So if we're borrowing for 30 years today, we'd be paying 4.78% on that loan. If we use that for roads or buildings, we could apply the non-residential construction inflation rate, which for Victoria so far in 2025 was 3.5%, meaning the real interest rate would be 1.28%. So while we are paying $47,800 of interest, it would be only equivalent to $12,800 because of doing it now rather than waiting for that cost to increase from being $1 million and at 3.5%. Now we've turned it into $1,035,000 the next year, etc. So kind of plays into the fire hall itself. The original cost of just the admin building was $230,000. If inflation was only 2%, since that was constructed back in 1977, we would only be at $604,000 for a new fire hall. Same thing goes with the apparatus bay. That costs $428,000. We're now looking at $3 million to get it up to code and have a few things done to it. So our inflation has far exceeded anybody's expectations, mostly because everybody factors into only consumer price index versus the construction. So the news only talks about CPI. They don't talk about residential construction or non-residential construction CPI. It's kind of hidden in the background, usually double, triple what actual inflation is for us. So it is, again, cheaper to do it now rather than waiting for inflation to pick away at something, especially on a project as enormous as building a new building. On a truck that was going to be $100,000, inflation goes up by 5%. Hey, it's another 100. Now it's 105. Right? On a fire hall, that's $10 million. Inflation's 5%. It's $500,000. Well, that's a lot. It's more than we'll ever collect in our taxes with our current tax base here. So with debt risks, as with any project, if you're going to use it to pay for infrastructure, there's a couple things that we can factor into. So interest rates are decreasing. So as mentioned, they may or may not be cut later on this year. By the time we would actually get this borrowing done, maybe there's some kind of decrease. Maybe there's a recession. Federal bank has to cut down rates. If we borrow today, we can't refinance that for 5 years. So we're stuck at that. And then who knows what happens over the 5 years, probably comes back up, and then we're stuck with the same rate as it is. Number two, future cost pressures. So when we come up with a financial plan to say, here's how much this is going to cost, this is the way we can pay for it over the next 30 years, the province and the federal government keep downloading costs. So the federal government says, I don't want to pay for this anymore. They pass it to the province. The province says, well, how are we going to pay for that? We'll download more costs on the municipality, and we get stuck with the bill at the end of the day. And we don't know what's going to be coming down next, right? We just got Ecom in 2025. We just got a company that was working for Ecom just broke off and turned into their own thing. So now we've got to pay them starting in 2026. And who knows what's going to happen next. So we can come up with a wonderful financial plan showing, okay, we need $250,000 to service our debt. We can make that work based on these. Province says, hey, here's a new healthcare cost. Now we make every municipality build their own community center with a healthcare practitioner and a doctor. Well, here's another $750,000 or $1 million a year. Boom, we got to come up with some way to pay for that, and we're already stuck with this debt because we can't get out of it. And then asset failure, typical of any construction. We build it, it falls apart after 5 years, we're out of warranty. Hopefully get some insurance money for it, but again, we're going back, we're still paying on debt for it, but now we got to rebuild it again and also at a higher cost. So there are some issues, but everybody faces those coming forward. So in order to fund our debt or capital projects, ideally, we all come from reserves, right? We've saved away, we've increased our tax rate in order to put money into our reserves to pay for the eventual replacement of the asset. We get to earn interest on that, helps lower the tax rates that we need to apply. Number two, current taxes. So we can do a big one-time tax increase or a 2 or 3 year tax increase to help pay for capital projects that are coming up out of nowhere. Kind of like, I think it was Gemini last year failed. And then, hey, now we got to pay another $50,000 because it turns out somebody just put stumps under the road as the base and it washed out. Number three, we can reconsider our service agreements and leases. Right now, the municipality has a number of $1 leases. We've got a number of service agreements, like West Shore Parks and Rec at $625,000 a year, the public library at $340,000 a year, and the costs to the Metchosin residents do not match the services currently provided to the residents here. So that'd be one way to find some cash. And then also operating budget reallocation. So if the debt servicing costs are small enough, we could be able to find some funding in the current budget by reducing certain expenditures or reducing the allocation of amortization to reserves for a length of time for the loan. Doesn't bode well in the long term, but if we want to reduce the burden currently, that's the way we would go. And then grants, of course, as we talked about here tonight, federal and provincial funding, along with non-for-profit organizations that provide grants for projects. They're pretty rare in the Firehall kind of infrastructure level. Like, you'll never get money for a new municipal hall. Might be able to do something for a school or rec center in the future, but they're generally few and far between for this type of infrastructure when it's not critical. They love giving money for water and sewer, but we don't have any of that, which saves us a bunch of money. So number one, ideal way is to pay through reserves, but we haven't allocated enough by not increasing the taxes. One resident pointed out that, yeah, it's residential taxes are not high enough in any municipality to actually pay for the services and capital that are required. And we've seen that with all the fire halls that have been mentioned, where they took on debt. The great one, Cumberland, right, was 4.2 million. They knew about that for 20 years, just kind of like us. They borrowed for the full 4.2 million. They didn't put it down away because, again, you want to stick with the 2% tax increases. And it's like, it's fine as long as you're willing to go say, all right, when this does come due, we're going to go borrow for it. So next up, that example, I've attached a number of schedules here showing what would happen if we borrowed $1 million. So if we set a tax increase at 5%, we would collect $72.15 from each residential home. This would generate $150,000 per year. If we assumed a return on that money of 3%, it would take 9 years to raise enough to pay for the construction of the new building. In the meantime, cost of construction would have increased by $1.52 million, equivalent to a one-time 50.8% tax increase. Whereas if the district borrowed the $1 million to fund the shortfall of the building, we could borrow that over 10 years. The tax increase would be 4.24% or $61, and the district would have a new fire hall 8 years before construction would start in the original option, which would end up actually saving $1.25 million for the taxpayer here, equivalent to a 41.75% tax increase, or $602. Running out the calculations was, even if the district were to do a 25% tax increase in a single year, it would take 2 years to save up the required funds to end up building that fire hall, or building, whatever you want it to be, costing the district an extra $33,160 versus borrowing that $1 million for the 10-year loan. So even if we try and do a gigantic tax increase to generate enough revenue, we're still stuck in a point where that inflation on that project, because it's so large, gets defeated by our cheaper interest rate that we can borrow from. So I'm happy to talk through any of those calculations or schedules, just pointing out that, again, right now, based on our revenue from 2024, the district can borrow up to $13 million over 30 years without requiring voter approval. Not recommending either or, just saying it's an option. There's a lot of people saying that you have to. That's more on the political side. I'm just talking about the rules and regulations for how it actually is required by the province. Any questions?
Okay, there's a lot there to synthesize, and hence my reiteration that we will discuss this again in September, if not October. So this will come back to you. This is for initial discussion, initial contemplation, based on the feedback that our CFO gets. He'll go away and answer some of the questions. So ask your questions, state your concerns. Do you want it presented in a different way? What is best for council here? This is for our information, but we can give direction. I'd like to see, a different table. Councillor Donaldson, did you want to start?
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Creek, for your report. The one thing that stands out for me was the part on debt risk, which we talked about this a little bit earlier, would have been helpful, but nevertheless, it confirms a number of things for me. But I guess for me now is, how much debt can we actually manage? And I think the concern also that I have is we have 26% of the people living in this community who are over 65, so they're not getting a working wage. They are on pensions or RSP, so they're at least half or less money is coming in. So to keep increasing taxes and considering another study that was done earlier on in the spring there with poverty, citing poverty, how are we going to actually push people more into that? So I'm really cautious about us delving into really big debts. I can understand, maybe borrowing some monies and stuff like that, but it's the more I read these reports and digest your presentation, which is more amiable than me going through finance books, I have to look at my community and see what it is that they can actually live with. And that's a big concern. And I keep hearing that from constituents. So when we're looking at projects like this, how big do we want this project to really be, and can it be phased in? And there's lots of alternatives we really have not explored. So those are still real concerns that I've been hearing, not only just today, but before now. So I appreciate you spelling out some of this. And those are just some of the things that I've been trying to balance as well. Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
Just following up on that through the chair, Mr. Creek, the debt risks, the future cost pressures, I think that's the big one for me as well. In the notion you talked about the downloading, we heard earlier from people in the audience about the pressure on the provincial government right now to reduce costs. And so they may be headed our way. You mentioned a few examples that were there before, but I'm wondering, we have things that we do know about now, like our assets, like the school needs some repairs and works on it. Is that figured in here in terms of, or will that be figured in when you come forward with your recommendations around how much reserves to use, for example? We had the one figure, and they're round numbers, but $6 million free and clear. We got them in reserves that are for this purpose, but they're the $8 million, the $2 million more means, I think, you had pointed out, well, that means we won't be doing the important work we need at the school. Are there other things that we need money for?
Through the chair, correct. So we've got the 2.8 from the Growing Community Fund. We got the 3.2 in the Building Replacement Reserve. Then we've got climate action money that we can use for the solar panels and the key pumps. We've got the general capital reserve that we can use for like anything. But again, as you mentioned, if we take all of the money out of that, which I'm not recommending for, right? I'm thinking like keep at least $500,000 sitting in that to help do whatever else is going to pop up. And thankfully, we've got a little bit of money in the school reserve. The main issue is, right, going forward, we empty out that building replacement reserve. All of these different buildings have contributed to that reserve, right? The municipal hall, the community hall, the public works yard. What else am I missing? There's a couple in there. But all of those are down to zero now. And they're all at least past their book life. There's still some life left in those assets themselves. But now we got to start stacking up some more money into reserves to help actually replace those if that's what council wants to do. And that's where I think we talked about it end of last year, maybe we started this year, was we need to start increasing taxes to pay into an asset management plan. And that's where if we start stacking 1% every year for the next 25 years, we get into a point where, okay, we might be all right. Now, when looking back on that plan versus what we've seen with our current costing for this Firehall, I don't even know if that's quite enough anymore, right? And with the cost of these buildings going up so high, maybe we need 2%, maybe we need 3%, but that's where we'd end up revisiting that plan every 5 years, right? See where we're at, where are the costs, and then what do we actually need here in the district, right? Do we need to go and rebuild the new school? Do we need to rebuild the community house? Do we need a new public works yard, et cetera?
Thank you. So I guess you're pointing out the risks that we face. This is a risk of taking on debt, and you're right on point in terms of what we've talked about before. And this very council decided not to put money aside for asset replacement. And oh my gosh, here we are now saying, gee, we better do that. So we're kind of not in good shape as a result. Now, the other things that we might, climate got a little bit of mention tonight. And one of the things that got me concerned is that, well, I guess this ties with the intergenerational equity on the first page, the idea that future taxpayers will help pay for the asset that we decide upon and that they'll receive services from. Quite a while back, we heard from Bill Cave, who's one of our elders in the community, and he was very strongly talking about the climate and saying, gosh, you know, he gets it that the Firehall might need to be replaced, and that's a good thing, and we should get to it. But his suggestion was to do as you say, here, the ideal way to pay for large capital projects, put money in reserves. He said, because you're going to face some climate problems, if you put it all into a Firehall, oh my gosh, you won't have the money to do other things. For example, if a couple of bridges get taken out, we wouldn't have the money for that. So that's the kind of risk I think you're talking about, or the roads, having a big problem with our roads. The flooding of the road, let's say, take something away. That would be the kind of cost pressure we'd have trouble with, in addition to the downloading and the stuff that we're kind of expecting. Fair enough?
Through the chair, correct. Thankfully, we've got a pretty decent road reserve as it is, and I'm currently working on the 26 through 2030 budget, and based on what we're putting away with for amortization for roads and the current projected plans for doing what we have, plus thankfully continued contributions from the province through the gas tax fund that helps pay for almost a third of what we're putting into the roads every year. We're actually sitting at a pretty decent spot come 2030 with the roads. But that one I'm not so concerned about. It really does come back to what we're doing with the buildings. And at what point do we need to replace those? Because we empty out the money in this thing, we're going to be in a tricky spot going forward for the other buildings.
You don't mind if I quote you on that tricky spot? This is obviously very difficult and complex work, and I really appreciate the effort that you're putting into it, Mr. Creek. It's really great to read these notes. Could you explain a little bit better? There was some, through the chair, there was a commentary made about this paragraph here. Future growth, pay for debt through future growth through new residents, businesses, and development, bringing new tax revenues. We've talked about that before. I think you gave us a report in February 3rd, 2025, saying that we're really facing some financial challenges here and would need to keep increasing taxes. And where would the revenues come from, I think was the question you posed, either through increasing density or businesses. Do you care to make a comment today as we take on this possibly quite a bit of debt? How will we manage, given your previous cautions?
Through the chair. Yeah, so when I'm talking about that, it was really, if you don't want to increase the taxes, because right now 95% of our tax revenue comes from residents. We've got an extremely small tax base. It's been growing at less than 1% a year.
1,667 residential property tax paying?
Yep, through the chair. That's about right. But it's been growing at less than 1% a year for the last quarter century, right? I could only go back to 2000. But it's been really slow growth, and it's on the residential side, which has the lowest tax rate out of any municipality on the Southern Island, where we have much higher tax rates in the light industrial and business part, right? Like the light industrial rate is 6 times what we charge a residential property owner. And that's where if you if you don't want to increase taxes so heavily on residential properties, it would certainly be an idea to look at development of some light industrial or more businesses. Right now, light industrial and business contribute less than 2% of our tax revenue. Highlands, they get 10% of their tax revenue from light industrial and businesses. Like that's, as far as I can tell, the closest comparison of a district where you got really small population, very rural district, and they've managed to do that, which has helped keep their taxes down, but they're still not as low as ours, right? And so if Metchosin can, do some planned development, that would help offset these costs that are going to come down. We can look at the RCMP costs, right? So when those came down in 2022 of, hey, here's our current estimate of $700,000. That is driven up to $1 million now for 2026. Because there was no development for business or light industrial, we're like, hey, we're going to put that all on 95% has to come from residential. We haven't even fully implemented the tax rate increase necessary to pay the RCMP yet. That has been slowly phased in and will be completed by 2030. But it is the largest tax increase that we show on residents here. So last year, our total tax increase was like 3.4%, right? Half of that was for RCMP. Right now, my current budget shows, again, we're like half of our tax increase is just going to be paying for RCMP. Whereas if you had some more light industrial, if you had some more businesses, that type of thing, it wouldn't be nearly as high because you'd have a large tax base, be able to collect from these people that have a way higher tax rate because of the mill rate, and it would just reduce the burden on the average resident who, again, one or two people are living in these homes versus a business that's generating revenue from tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of clients. So it's just a better way to kind of collect money on a more fair basis. But not saying do it, but the money could be there that would help pay for all of this.
Thanks. That's pretty clear. I think tonight if we push forward option 1A, we're kind of not following our OCP, and section 7, section 3, we're not following council policy. The problem with development at the moment, our OCP and our direction of our community doesn't show much for development, of course, and you know that. But I take your point. If you want to make this money, this is how a community would do that. It's just that we're choosing not to do that. So what are the other solutions, I suppose? Or what are the other paths we might take?
I maybe have a question or two.
Yeah, Councillor Turpin, go ahead.
So, Mr. Creek, just a few basic questions. Do you recall how much money we put in reserves last year?
Through the chair, it was about 2.2 million. So 1.3 of that came from the amortization of our assets, and then we had a nice surplus of about 800,000 to add on top of that.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And that's kind of why putting that adding the 1% was more than offset by the surplus that was generated in the year. Right? It's like 800,000 worth almost 27%. So it's like, okay, we don't have to do it for this year. We've got such a large surplus. That's pretty good. But we do need constant set funding going into the asset management rather than just hoping and praying that we're going to have a surplus in a year, because we did get really good returns on investment.
And bravo to you for helping us with that. So, and I again, through you, Mayor Little, I do want to take my hat off to you for identifying the looming asset gap and the need to respond as well. And I agree with Councillor Gray. You presented us with an option of putting 1 or 2% on. At the time, I didn't think it was the right thing to do, but I think it's something that we need to consider in this current year. And I mentioned, graphically or maybe immaturely, the concept of a time bomb, but I feel like that's covered in your point here about asset failure and how that is something that we have to keep our eyes on. And also, and I think this is a key question here, invest when the time is right to invest, because things basically do not get cheaper. And it seems like that is affirmed in your financial plan. And I really appreciate the assessment of what saving would be versus borrowing in this current environment. So, any comments, sir?
Through the chair. Yeah. Thank you. What we've got going on, like your reference to time bomb, that was one thing that I picked up in my first couple months when I was like reviewing your budgets and what was going on and talking with Public Works. Was there been a reduction in what you're doing with ditching and shoulders and culverts and that type of thing? And it was because the cost involved in doing the ditching is like when you scoop that out, unfortunately it's contaminated because of runoff from the roads. We can't just take it and dump it at the blanket on the name, Hartful. I don't know if that was the one here. But we can't take it there. We have to take it to a contaminated dump site. And because that was across the Malahat, we're like, oh, okay, now our costs have been escalated so much. And it was well north of 6 figures in order to do the operation every year. And that was just basic kind of, like below kind of basic maintenance based on my discussions with Public Works. And because we're not doing that, these ditches and culverts start to fill up. And we get a heavy amount of rain here in the winter. And if we get a bad enough atmospheric river, it could end up clogging those culverts, washing out a road, and then we're at a point where, okay, now we're reliant on our road reserve. We're like, okay, now we're going to spend $2 million because we didn't want to spend $150,000 or $200,000 to actually clear those ditches and clear those culverts in time. And so it's just kind of been something that's been done where it's like, cost too much, kick it down. Hopefully nothing goes wrong. And unfortunately, something's going to go wrong at some point. We just don't know when. We're going to keep hoping and praying that's going to be fine. But it's a really iffy proposition for a municipality to be operating under that presumption. Because, again, with the really small tax base that we have here, if you get hit with something like that, again, you're not looking at a 10% tax increase. It would be a significant amount. We would be borrowing immediately without any kind of like lead time, and we're just stuck with the bill, and it would negatively impact a lot of people here. But sorry,
just one more comment or observation. I've long suspected, and I've gone and calculated for a few years now the mill rates between all the different municipalities, and it's pretty tricky sometimes because certain things are added, certain things are not. But I think I've heard from you now that we have the lowest tax rate on in the CRD, Southern Vancouver Island the residential mill rate. Are you referring to?
Through the chair, correct. Residential mill rate.
Okay.
Like even on the business end, we're still lower on that too. But I don't really deep dive into those too much. It's more of a like, okay, what does it look like as a soft comparison? The residential one I'm more focused on because that impacts most people here. Right? Okay. We have very few businesses.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Mr. Creek.
Any other questions? I have just a quick question regarding or comment regarding your debt example. I think this is a really great example for people to hear, especially when you refer to what it actually means for a taxpayer, what it would be in dollars and cents. Could you just briefly go over the debt example that you have on page 47, just to put it into context?
Through the chair? Yeah, again, sorry, I don't know I rushed through that in the first one, so it probably didn't make a whole lot of sense when I was talking about that. So if we have a $1 million shortfall for an asset, any kind of asset, the cost of waiting for us to save up the $1 million versus borrowing the $1 million immediately to complete it, there is a big difference in cost because inflation has been outstripping what we earn in interest for a number of years. When I looked into it, I think I showed at the last finance report back in May or June, whenever it was, in the 90s, interest savings rate 10%, inflation 2%. Awesome, right? You could beat that anytime. Since our wonderful recession there in 2007-8, and they slashed interest rates so much, inflation's always been beating interest rates. So you're never going to be able to save fast enough to beat inflation. And then when you look at it on such a large project, that's where we get caught. So again, for inflation is 5% on $1 million, it goes up by $50,000. If we're paying interest of 4% on $1 million, much less. And that's where we end up getting to save a lot of money in the long run. So saying, let me take a peek at on our page 57. So based on 3% inflation with 3% investment return, with $1 million difference, saying, hey, the fire hall costs $5 million, we've got $4 million in reserve. If we wait to save up the money to pay for the fire hall, it would take until 2034 where we have enough money in reserve to offset the cost of the fire hall, which results in the $5 million fire hall going up to 6.523, meaning in total increase in construction costs is $1.5 million. Whereas if we borrowed $1 million over 10 years, the total interest paid for that is $271,000, meaning the district would save $1.2 million by borrowing in the first year to pay for that construction versus trying to save up through tax collection. And that's where it can get so high with these tax increases, all the way up to 25%. And it would still take you 2 years, and it would still end up costing you $33,000. And that's shown on page 62. So fire hall increases from $5 million to $5.3 million. Meanwhile, again, $270,000 of interest that you paid over the 10-year loan. So we would save $33,000 versus trying to increase our taxes. And so that's when we want to extrapolate out, and like I can show that if we kind of settle on this idea of, okay, we're going to have to borrow $7 million. So if we've got our $6 to $8 million in reserves, we get our $7 million grant, costs us $21 million, and we have to borrow $7 to pay for the difference. I can run the numbers, and when I did my first kind of calculations on it, there was no point in time where we were ever going to do an increase of 5% and we would ever catch up to the inflated cost of that fire hall. Like, impossible. It was minimum 10%, and even that took you 2 decades to do. So it turns into it's just so much more costly to wait for this to be built, rather than just go borrow at the nice 4% number and then pay off the interest. It's not the greatest thing in the world. I'm an accountant. I don't want debt, right? It sucks. But when you're put into a position of, we need to get a new fire hall, this is what it's going to cost. What's the cheapest way to do it? It's to borrow.
Okay. Pretty sobering. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, through the chair. So the mayor was invited us to comment about what we might see coming when you take a look at this again. And I would appreciate if you would clarify that issue of, using 6 million, not 8 million, for the reasons you've explained. Also, the change, be clear about this change in allocation of the amortization to reserves, which I think you're advising against. I mean, it's an option in the perfect world or the imperfect world, but not something that we're likely to do. And then I think also it'd be helpful, like rolled into this, is what is the best thing for us to do about our existing assets, let alone the fire department, existing assets, that issue of we need a tax increase simply to keep pace with our assets at the moment. What I'm thinking, and you'll have more, Mr. Creek, than I've got there, I'm thinking about if you could, through the mayor, contextualize this. So we say, well, this is, because you told us we've got financial challenges coming. You've been pretty clear about that in your February report, and before that, your December report, saying we don't have the money to do to take care of our assets. Those ones should be in there. And anything else that you know about in terms of the context of this decision, because I think it's not entirely clear how this all comes together, but you're helping us get there. Thank you. Thank you.
The question is there any other building structure in the community that is greater priority than, and is in a worse state than the administration of the fire hall or the administration building of the fire hall?
Through the chair, not that I've been told about. The one we were working in seems pretty good. When I came down here, saw this compared to where I came from. This was Shangri-La. It's like the town of Comox was, again, that one was built in, again, the 50s. When our new CFO showed up, he thought it was a trailer. So I think this is probably good for a while. School seems to be doing well after the renovations. We've had people go in there, take a look about doing some other things for their businesses. The architects have been like, this is great. You did a great job with getting this up to code and everything like that. The only thing, I haven't spent a lot of time over the community house itself. I haven't heard Public Works complain about their buildings in their shed. So I think that's pretty decent. Just going off of accounting terms, right? Like the life of the asset is gone. Like we've amortized them fully. Like we're only collecting amortization off of that apparatus-based structure. Like the roof is passed, the services are fully amortized. That doesn't mean it's no good anymore. It's just when you say, hey, this thing's got a 50-year life, we're not taking any money into reserves for it anymore. Maybe you should look at doing something with it. Whether that's actually doing a full rebuild or, okay, now we definitely got to increase our maintenance of it and really have somebody else come out and look at it, see what they can do. But I think for the most part, the fire hall is definitely number one priority, right? It's like I was in there on Friday when it was raining and the roof was leaking and the tiles were bowing and then collapsed. I haven't seen that anywhere else. So.
Councillor Gray.
And maybe just a question about that. So I think someone gave a number a little while ago about if we received a grant, if we were to build, everything worked out really well, it's still a number of years away. I'm curious, and perhaps it's not a question for you, Mr. Creek, but something that I think would be helpful for administration to let us know is, what are we going to do about that leak in the roof right now? Shouldn't it be fixed? It's not a big cost. We're talking tens of millions of dollars here. It's, kind of a drop in the bucket to fix the roof so that people can be there and enjoy it. Or we get trailers and move people out now. I mean, it's just a different cost, but I kind of would like to take care of some of those problems in the general time, that without delay. It could be a couple of years, and I like what people are saying. They're really concerned, but then when they won't do anything about what's actually happening today, it feels like they're not that concerned. The other thing is, I noticed the fascia boards on the apparatus bay came off. Maybe that they came out from the Herald Engineering work. I don't know, but if those fascia boards, we have the money to replace those or put them back up again and paint them.
Through the chair, I'll start with the fascia. That was the windstorm from, maybe like a month ago or something. I got the photo on like Saturday morning. Look what happened. I believe fire chief has been looking into getting that repaired. To the roof itself, yeah, you're right. Like it's going to take at least 2 years probably before anything starts moving in that construction zone, no matter what option is chosen. So there will be numbers in the budget here for 2026 through 2030 about these increased costs, either through getting people in trailers, or here we're going to patch the roof that will last for at least, we just need, if we're going to do a new fire hall, just do it for 2 or 3 years. And we don't need the best repair, but we need something that will stop the leaks for at least a couple years.
And I believe we have money in the budget for that at the moment. Where that is.
Through the chair, I think now that you mention it, you could be correct. I think we might have removed it based on this fire hall actually coming around. But we've got money in reserves that we could put into it. It would just drop down what we got available for the final construction. But I think when I was talking to the fire department earlier this week, he might have had a quote. Don't hold me or anybody to it, but it was like about $50,000. So let's see what happens with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, with that, thank you very much. We look forward to your report again in September. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the notice of motion.
Yeah, two. The first one is about Firehall Steering Committee. And the motion would be that council direct the Firehall Steering Committee, as per their terms of reference, to see that a roadmap of the processes and steps from concept through completion of the project is prepared for council that also identifies what professional support will be needed at each stage. The second motion would be that council directs staff to ensure the architectural firm JDA complete all deliverables as outlined in their contract. Thank you.
Okay, so those notices of motion don't require a seconder. They've been read in and they'll be addressed at our next meeting. With that, I want to thank everybody for attending this meeting, and I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.